Chapter 110. As usual, Su Li rushed back to the courtyard of the school from the Leanly building and meditated for a night. When she got up in the morning, Mammy Li had prepared a hot breakfast. After she entered the inborn realm, she didn't need food. She could maintain her body by absorbing the nimbus of heaven and earth. But she still liked to drink a mouthful of warm and refreshing millet porridge every morning. The sunshine outside the window shone into the room. It was a very good day with no clouds. Su Li listened to the birds singing in the forest outside the window. Her eyes were shining from time to time. She had been waiting these days. According to Wu Yun's vicious character, she wouldn't retreat directly after she failed. Su Li guessed that the next wave of revenge should be more fierce. But she waited for so many days without any movement, which made her a little uneasy. After all, she only saw the corpse of this person in the previous life. She didn't see her means when she was alive. But since she could control the Gong family in Yunjing, she must not be as easy to deal with as Zhu Yan. When Su Li was thinking, Xiao walked quickly from outside the courtyard at this time and presented an invitation. He said, "Lord, this is sent by the College of Martial Arts." Su Li got rid of distractions and reached out to open it. The more she read, the more surprised she was. The gist of the letter was that there was a peerless genius in the College of Martial Arts. He reached the acquired 9th hurdle at the age of 17, which was 2 years earlier than Jin Chang'eo. He broke the record of the college. Therefore, the College of Martial Arts specially held a small banquet for him and invited all the lecturers and outstanding students of the Qinghe school. After reading, Su Li put down the paper and pondered. It was reasonable to say that such a person was enough to attract the attention of some sects in the martial arts circle and then make the little genius famous. She tried her best, but couldn't remember such a person in the previous life. Either the genius didn't appear in the Qinghe town in the previous life, or the genius died too quickly in the previous life and was not as famous as in this life. Su Li showed a little interest in her eyes. The stall of the Leanly building had just been opened and was short of people. "Lord, people in the College of Martial Arts always look down on the College of Liberal Arts. Do we still go there?" Seeing Su Li's hesitation, Xiao couldn't help but ask. Su Li came to herself and said with a smile, "Although I don't know what exactly they are celebrating, since there is a genius in the school, we should go and have a look. You go downstairs and change into nice clothes and go with me. If you don't have any, you can ask Mammy Li for some money." Xiao's face lit up when he heard that, and he immediately went to change clothes. Which man didn't want to be a wuxia? Although it was impossible for him to come into contact with things of that level in his life, it was still good to feast his eyes. In the evening, Su Li sat in the carriage and crossed the high wall of the College of Martial Arts with her original identity for the first time. She came to the martial arts field. Although it was a small banquet, many people came because of the so-called geniuses. There were more than 100 people from the Faculty of Liberal Arts and the Faculty of Martial Arts. There were more than 300 to 400 people in total. An ordinary courtyard would not be able to accommodate such a scene. In the end, the Institute of Martial Arts decided to hold a banquet in the spacious martial arts field. The martial arts field could accommodate 1,000 people practicing martial arts at the same time, so a banquet for 300 to 400 people was naturally more than enough. When Su Li came with Xiao Wu, there were already a lot of people in the martial arts field. The steward of the College of Martial Arts, who was guarding outside the martial arts field, was stunned when he saw Su Li's token. Then he suddenly understood. It turned out that she was the 16-year-old genius lecturer. Unfortunately, she was from the Faculty of Liberal Arts. Otherwise, there would be a fierce fight tonight. "Lecturer Su, the lecturer can bring a follower in. Please come in." Seeing Xiao Wu followed by Su Li, the steward did not stop them and welcomed them in with a smile. The martial arts field had changed greatly at this moment. The original weapon racks and archery targets were all removed. Instead, there were neat rows of small banquet tables, which almost occupied more than half of the martial arts field. Although Su Li had been running the nothing unusual, her original appearance was extremely delicate. She attracted the attention of many young talents as soon as she came in. Some reckless people even came up to talk to her directly. But when they saw Su Li followed by a follower, they were all shocked. In the Qinghe school, All the people were rich or noble. Personal privileges were certainly useless. Even the daughter of the satrap's mansion did not bring a maid. But this miss who looked younger than the daughter of the satrap's mansion brought a follower. It's lecturer Sue. Someone reacted. The young talents who went up to talk to her immediately stopped and looked embarrassed. If they were accused of harassing female lecturers, they didn't want to be expelled from the Qinghe school. Xiao followed Su Li and looked around. He was full of excitement. There were many snacks that he had never seen before. The men who came here were gentle and elegant. The women were all ladies with excellent temperament and character. Some of them might even be the future pillars of the Qinghe town and even the Dahan country. He didn't expect that a nobody like him could have the honor to see them. It was all brought to him by Su Li. Xiao felt that the best decision he made in his life was undoubtedly to become Su Li's follower. He could see the scenery that was completely different from his previous life. Su Li, you are here. Feng Qingru was standing with Wen Ruomin. She inadvertently glanced at Su Li and immediately ran over. She took Su Li's hand and said with a smile, "Follow me. I will take you to see a person." Then she took Su Li to Wen Ruomin's side without waiting for Su Li's explanation. When they approached, Su Li saw a handsome young man in luxurious clothes standing behind Wen Ruomin. He was talking and laughing with Wen Ruomin and other old deans. He seemed to be very talkative. "Su Li, you are here." Wen Ruomin smiled and took Su Li's hand. She pointed at the young man in luxurious clothes and said, "Let me introduce you. This is Lin Yanqing. Child Lin is the protagonist of this small banquet. He is a genius in the College of Martial Arts. With his talent in martial arts, he is qualified to be a special class lecturer in the College of Martial Arts. He is almost the same as you." Before Su Li said anything, Lin Yanqing cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Grandma Wen, you are overpraising me. I just have the talent and strength. I am not as smart as lecturer Su." Su Li slightly bowed to him as a greeting. Child Lin is too modest. She didn't look at Lin Yanqing. Instead, she looked at the face of the girl behind Lin Yanqing. She seemed to have seen this face somewhere. Lin Yanqing's smile was slightly stagnant. He noticed that Su Li was absent-minded. Immediately, he looked back and said with a smile, "Lecturer Su seems to be interested in my distant cousin. Let me introduce her to you. This is my distant cousin, Lin Xiang. Speaking of which, my cousin lives in a town not far from Lecturer Su's hometown. It is really fate. The fact that Su Li came from the Desu town was not a secret. Instead, it was known to everyone. After all, many people had seen the letter from Satrap Yin." Hearing Lin Yanqing's answer, Su Li's eyes flashed slightly. She nodded slightly. She remembered that she had met Lin Xiang once at the birthday banquet of the Yang family. "Ho ho! We old guys will not participate in the conversation between you young people." Seeing Su Li and others chatting, Wen Ruomin and others left with a smile. Soon, there were only 5 people left. When Lin Xiang saw Su Li again, she had mixed feelings in her heart, and her face was a little ugly. Before she came here, she had a premonition that she would meet Su Li, but when she really saw Su Li, she naturally had a different feeling. Fortunately, after Su Zipei cooperated with her to harm Su Li, the news didn't spread at all. Su Li didn't know that it was her who brought the aphrodisiac. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't stand here. "Cousin, why do you look pale? Are you not feeling well?" Lin Yanqing's eyes were sharp. He noticed the abnormality and asked with a smile. Lin Xiang felt cold in her heart. She quickly shook her head and said, "It's just a little cold. Cousin is fine." Her cousin was the first young master of the main family. It was not easy for her to hook up with him. She took the opportunity to come here to broaden her horizons. How could she hide in fear just because she saw Su Li? Wouldn't it be revealing that she was hiding something? "It's good that you're fine." Lin Yanqing responded lightly. He turned his head and his eyes became gentle again. He chuckled and said, "I heard that lecturer Su has excellent embroidery skills. You have a unique skill in advanced needlework. I am usually obsessed with practicing martial arts, so I am very curious about it. Lecturer Su, why don't you sit with me and broaden my horizons?" Su Li looked at where Lin Yanqing pointed. He pointed at the most conspicuous seat on the right side of the main seat. "No need." Su Li shook her head and smiled. She declined politely. You're the main family today. It's reasonable for you to sit in the main seat. It's not appropriate for me to sit in the east seat. If Child Lin is interested, you can come to my class. I have something to talk with the daughter of the Yin family. So, I won't stay here any longer. Su Li bowed and turned away. Lin Yinxing's right hand froze in place, and his smile slowly disappeared. Lin Xiang immediately took the opportunity to say angrily, Cousin, Su Li is too ungrateful. Who does she think she is? It's just that my luck is a little better. Shut up. Lin Yinxing scolded in a low voice. His tone became indifferent again. Remember your identity. Don't say such words again. Otherwise, if someone hears it, you can't enter the Qinghe school even with my help. Lin Xiang choked and didn't dare to say another word. At the same time, she looked around in a panic. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, she was relieved. Almost everyone is here. Follow me to start the banquet. You stand behind me and don't sit down. Otherwise, people will think you are ungrateful. Lin Yinxing ordered in a low voice and didn't look at Lin Xiang anymore. If it weren't for this cousin who helped him in that way, he wouldn't have brought her here and lowered his status for no reason. Lin Xiang said yes and stood behind Lin Yinxing with her head lowered. Tears appeared in her eyes. The jealousy in her heart grew wildly like weeds and soon filled her heart. Why? She was the first miss of the collateral branch of the Lin family. This B***TCH, Su was just born in a small family. Her parents didn't love her, and she was almost sent to drown in a pig cage by the officials. Why did everything change after she came to the Qinghe town? Her cousin, who was good at both literature and martial arts, treated her coldly, but he was extremely gentle to Su Li. He even didn't want to say something a little harsh. After the banquet, she could only stand like a maid, but Su Li could sit down and talk with those high officials and nobles. Why on earth? Lin Xiang asked frantically in her heart. She clenched her fists so hard that her knuckles turned pale. Her ears were filled with laughter, but she knew that this excitement was not hers. She was just a pitiful person who was still desperately trying to climb into the circle. But Su Li was already sitting on the throne, looking down at her with a contemptuous look. During the banquet, Yin Hongxiu, Feng Qingru, and Su Li sat together, which formed a very beautiful scene and attracted the attention of the people at the other tables. After Su Li pretended to be seriously injured and recuperated in the Yin family for 3 days, the relationship between her and Yin Hongxiu improved a lot. They didn't oppose each other as tit for tat as before. In the past few months, accidents happened frequently. Yin Hongxiu also became more mature. She always carried the silver longbow and faintly exuded a vigorous spirit of a heroine. Su Li, why is the maid behind Child Lin trembling all the time? Is she afraid? Yin Hongxiu came over and whispered, She can't stand such a scene. It seems that the maid of the Lin family is not so good. Su Li smiled and didn't say anything. She thought about it. Lin Xiang's strange reaction reminded her that the culprit of being drugged in the Yang family hadn't been found yet. Chapter 111. After 3 rounds of drinking, the atmosphere of the banquet gradually became warm. I am indebted to all the teachers for holding this banquet just for me. The martial arts circle is hard and dangerous, and I still have a long way to go. Please help me in the future. I, Lin Yinxing, propose a toast to all the teachers and classmates. Lin Yinxing stood up. Although his words were polite, they attracted the applause of the whole hall. The atmosphere of the small banquet was pushed to the climax. Many young girls in the College of Liberal Arts looked at Lin Yinxing with a trace of affection. If they could marry such an excellent Langjun, their lives would be worthwhile. Lin Yinxing's eyes fell on Su Li from time to time, hoping to see a trace of intimacy from her eyes. Unfortunately, he found that Su Li not only didn't show any intimacy, but even talked and laughed with Feng Qingru and Yin Hongxiu from beginning to end. She didn't even look at him. Lin Yinxing was slightly disappointed, and then he became more interested. She deserves to be an excellent girl as talented as me. If she shows that kind of eyes to others, she will not be beautiful. Only such a perfect girl can match me and give birth to a more perfect next generation. After dealing with the teachers, Lin Yinxing sat in the seat and drank a glass of wine from time to time. He had begun to think about how to propose marriage. He expected that with the background of the Lin family in the Qinghe town, it was impossible for the Lin family in the Desu town to refuse. Suli should feel lucky to have such an excellent husband. Suli was sensitive and naturally noticed Lin Yinxing's eyes. She couldn't help but feel a little troublesome. If the Lin family really wanted to propose marriage, Su Huanli, who had always wanted to develop in the Qinghe town, would definitely not refuse. After an hour, the banquet was over. Suli went back in advance with the excuse that she was too drunk, so Lin Yinxing didn't have a chance to get close to her. When Lin Yinxing returned home with Lin Xiang, the old butler immediately greeted him and said with a happy face, "First Master, you've finally come back. You are famous all over the world this time. An hour ago, the doorsill of our house was almost broken by the matchmakers. They're all young ladies from big families in the town." Lin Yinxing frowned and immediately quickened his pace to go in. Lin Xiang immediately followed him, feeling nervous. Her cousin promised her the position of a concubine. If her cousin chose a young lady from a certain family today, then she would have to respect that young lady in the future. Looking at Lin Xiang, who followed Lin Yinxing like a little wife, the old butler shook his head slightly. He didn't know why the master, who was so picky, liked Lin Xiang, who was not good-looking and talented. "Father, return these portraits. I already have a suitable candidate in mind." Lin Xingrong, the master of the Lin family, was shocked by Lin Yinxing's first sentence. Then the slightly fat master of the Lin family, who was in his 40s, pulled Lin Yinxing's arm and said in a low voice, "Yinxing, you came just in time. I was just about to tell you that I, your father, have already returned all of Matchmaker's albums." Lin Yinxing was a little happy and said in surprise, "Does it mean that you already know which miss I want?" Lin Xingrong chuckled, stroked his beard and nodded. "That lady is definitely worthy of you." "Is she really Su Li?" There was excitement in Lin Yinxing's eyes. He was afraid that his family would dislike Su Li's family background and obstruct him. He didn't expect that his father had arranged everything. Lin Xiang followed Lin Yinxing with a pale face and a flash of resentment in her eyes. If Su Li really lived on her head for the rest of her life, she would rather die directly. Lin Xingrong was stunned and looked strange. "Yinxing, why do you think of her? The girl of the Su family is indeed talented, but she is just talented. It is hard to say whether she can go further in the future. You know her family background. How could she be worthy of our Lin family? I want to say that she is the daughter of the Jin family." "The Jin family? That Jin Roland?" Lin Yinxing's face was slightly pale. He had been in the Qinghe town for so many years and certainly had seen Jin Ruolin. Thinking of her disgusting face, Lin Yinxing almost vomited and couldn't help but refute. "Father, if I remember correctly, Jin Ruolin was dropped out of the Qinghe school and expelled from the embroidery workshop. Her reputation is too bad. How could she be worthy of me?" "So, Su Li is worthy of you?" Lin Xingrong pulled a long face and said, "It seems that you are really fascinated by Su Li today. You're not calm. How can you take charge of our Lin family in the future? Let me slowly explain this matter to you." Then, Lin Xingrong glanced at Lin Xiang behind Lin Yinxing. Lin Xiang immediately understood and left, leaving only the father and son of the Lin family. Lin Yinxing glanced at Lin Xiang, who was well-behaved, and said coldly, "Father, just say it. If you ask me to marry Jin Ruolin without a good reason, I will never agree." "You." Lin Xingrong was so angry that he stared at his son. But when he thought of his son's brilliant achievements, he couldn't bear to scold him. Finally, he said in a low voice, "It is the madam of the Gong family in Yunjing who introduced you. Do you know what it means?" "The Gong family in Yunjing?" Lin Yinxing's face changed a little bit. "Yes." Lin Xingrong waved his sleeves and said, "Do you think your father is stupid? Marrying the Jin family at the cusp of the storm is undoubtedly going against the rules. But if there's a madam of the Gong family, it will be completely different." Lin Xingrong was excited and said, "The Gong family is a big aristocratic family, and the madam who came to visit is a relative of the general's mansion in Yinjing. Such a big shot connects us with the Jin family, no matter what her purpose is. If we can unite and bring down the Yin family, the entire Qingatown will be ours. There is even a slight possibility that you could develop in Yunjing through Madame Gong. Lin Xingrong deserved to be the head of the Lin family. He was eloquent and soon persuaded Lin Yinxing. Your vision should not be limited to the Qingatown. Yunjing, even the entire Han country, is the world for you to develop. There is only one Su Li in the Qingatown, but there may be thousands of Su Li in Yunjing. Our Lin family has no backer in Yunjing. Even if you go there through the martial arts competition, it will be difficult. Now is an opportunity. Son, you should seize it. After hearing his father's words, Lin Yinxing was finally convinced. He couldn't make up his mind for a while. After a long time, he finally raised his head and nodded slightly under Lin Xingrong's slightly anxious eyes. I want to know which family will make the decision if the Jin family and the Lin family unite by marriage. I don't want to be dominated by a woman. The Jin family was much more powerful than the Lin family. Lin Yinxing's worry was reasonable. If the three families worked together to overthrow the Yin family, but the Jin family was the one in charge, wouldn't they lose all their hard-earned money? Lin Xingrong smiled proudly and said, if the Jin family had Jin Sheng-o, Madame Gong would definitely choose the Jin family. But now the Jin family has no talent. Of course, Madame Gong thinks highly of you. She has clearly said that if you are good enough, she doesn't mind helping you in Yunjing. Lin Yinxing's eyes were shining, and his ambition was expanding at this moment. All kinds of glorious scenes flashed through his mind. Finally, he slightly lowered his head and said, I have a narrow vision. Father, you can make the decision. I am willing to marry the daughter of the Jin family. Good. Don't be arrogant and rash. The party committee will accept it. Lin Xingrong was comforted. He had such an excellent son. His life was worthwhile. With Wu Yun as the middleman, the Lin family and the Jin family acted very quickly. The marriage was completed within 1 day after the news came out. The Yin family didn't react at all. Lin Yinxing married Jin Rulin. In the Linli building, Su Li couldn't help but frown slightly when she received the news. The actions of the two families were so strange that she couldn't figure it out. The Lin family in the Qingatown was almost the same as the Ran family and the Qin family. It was far less powerful than the Jin family. Moreover, at this time, the Jin family was at a low point. The Lin family's action was almost equivalent to jumping into a fire pit. It was really unwise. There must be something I don't know. Su Li rubbed her eyebrows. The two families acted very quickly and secretly. She couldn't find out anything for a while. She could only see what they would do next. During this time, the Yin family had been digesting the results of the war with peace of mind. Its power had become much larger. Presumably, the Yin family could hold on for a long time in the face of the attacks of the two families. It was enough for her to find out the reason. At this time, there was a slight sound of footsteps outside the door. Fang Yuan arrived in a hurry. He said, I have found out that Lin Xiang is the miss of the Lin family in the Heli Town. She has a bad reputation. It is said in the black market that she often sells aphrodisiacs and has a lot of strange, obscene prescriptions. Su Li's eyes flashed when she heard that. She said, it seems that we have to intervene in the affairs of the Lin family. You go to the black market in the Heli Town again and buy some aphrodisiacs sold by Lin Xiang. I need them. Fang Yuan blushed and moved his lips. When he was about to say something, Su Li raised her hand and said, is Luo Yichen's injury almost healed? Basically healed. I can't see his cultivation clearly. It should be close to mine. A sense of comparison flashed in Fang Yuan's eyes. Chu Qingning's cultivation finally reached the acquired 8th hurdle. He recently broke through to the acquired 9th hurdle. But before he was relieved, Su Li recruited another powerful person. No, he is at the peak of the acquired hurdle. Of course, you can't see his cultivation clearly. Su Li shook her head slightly and mercilessly exposed Fang Yuan's fantasy. Fang Yuan's pupils shrank slightly, and he was immediately silent. He had always been the first senior under Su Li's command. Now he was suddenly surpassed by others. It was not a good feeling. At this time, Su Li's voice came again. She was slightly gentle. You are only 17 years old, but he is already more than 20 years old. It is not surprising that his cultivation is higher than yours. Fang Yuan was slightly stunned when he heard that. Was she comforting him? Luo Yichen will go to the black market to buy aphrodisiacs. You go and tell him that he should work since he has eaten my food for a month. Su Li took a piece of paper, wrote a line of words, and handed it to Fang Yuan. She said, "The Qinghe town will not be peaceful again. You secretly investigate Wu Yun's movement. Don't alarm them. Ask Chu Qingning to secretly protect Feng Qingru recently." Orders were passed down in an orderly manner. Fang Yuan secretly remembered them and turned to go downstairs. Although the Leanly building still operated as a winery on the surface, it seemed that there was a little pyramid differentiation of power levels. In a closed small martial arts field in the backyard, Luo Yichen was sweating profusely. He was waving the long spear in his hand. The long spear was like a dragon, pointing at all parts of the wooden figurines accurately. Mei Ruhan finished the task given by Yin Xuedong at a small table on one side. She looked up from time to time. Her eyes were full of sparkling light. She never thought that she would be so happy if she spent every day so ordinary. Luo Yichen was very peaceful with the beautiful woman beside him. After his body recovered, his strength soared to the peak of the acquired hurdle. Although he was not Mr. Li's opponent, he could protect Mei Ruhan from being hurt. At this time, Fang Yuan with a cold face came over and handed a note to Luo Yichen. He turned around and left without saying anything. Chapter 112. Mr. Li finally sent you out to do something? After Fang Yuan left, Mei Ruhan stood up and leaned over. She wanted to see what was written on the note. Luo Yichen immediately put away the note and said seriously, "Mr. Li said to keep it a secret. Don't peek at it. Without further ado, I will set off immediately." "I see." Mei Ruhan heard what he said and nodded obediently. "Go ahead. Be careful on the way." Luo Yichen left quietly, but he was slightly annoyed. The woman definitely did it on purpose. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Otherwise, he didn't know what Ruhan would think of him. Su Li naturally didn't know that she didn't mean to order and was misunderstood by Luo Yichen. She was still in the attic at the moment, holding the AO sword skills that she got from Jin Sheng AO. This sword skill was regarded as the peerless swordsmanship by people in the martial arts circle in the previous life. She naturally had to practice it, but she didn't practice from right to left like Jin Sheng AO. Instead, she practiced from left to right and started from the last level. In the previous life, she heard countless rumors about the AO sword skills. The secrets of it had long been thoroughly understood by people in the martial arts circle. For example, this sword skill was equivalent to a circle. There was no general outline and no words to mark the order of the realm. It seemed that it could be practiced from left to right, from right to left, or from the middle. In the previous life, this sword skill fell into the hands of the beggar from Jin Shang AO. The beggar practiced it in a muddle. Coincidentally, he chose the completely opposite way of practicing with Jin Shang AO. He accidentally played all kinds of magic of the AO sword skills and became famous as Sword Marquis in the later generations. In contrast, Jin Sheng AO was too unlucky. The wrong way of practicing led to defects in his state of mind. The deeper he practiced, the defects would be infinitely magnified. Eventually, he completely lost his humanity and died in madness. Su Li just slightly advanced Jin Sheng AO's death and intercepted the opportunity of Sword Marquis in the previous life. So, the fate of the little beggar was unknown. "Sisterly, are you there?" When Su Li was recalling, Fong Ling's clear voice suddenly came from outside the door. "The rice wine brewed in the underground cellar is almost full. What should we do?" Creak. As soon as Fong Ling finished her words, Su Li dressed as Mr. Li walked out of the room. She said, "Call Xuedong and Haidin. Let's go to the underground wine cellar together." Fong Ling's blinking eyes suddenly lit up, and she immediately turned around and went downstairs to gather people. Mei Ruhan heard the noise and poked her head out from behind the cabinet. She didn't know where Su Li and others went. She couldn't help but be curious, but she didn't dare to follow them without Mr. Li's permission. Suli opened the secret door of the underground addendum and came to the underground wine cellar. She immediately smelled the strong aroma of wine. The wine cellar, with a radius of 60 square meters, was full of shelves. Jars of wine were neatly placed on the shelves. One more thing. Fong Ling counted her fingers and said worriedly, "There are not many dried osmanthus in the warehouse. It can last for a month at most. If the new wine is not ready, we won't have anything to sell next month." Suli nodded slightly and said softly, "Today is the 7th day of March. There is still more than 4 months before the osmanthus blossoms. Last year, we were short-handed, so it was normal that we didn't have enough osmanthus flowers. We have enough people this year. Remember to go to the osmanthus forest to collect enough osmanthus. Now, I will teach you how to make new wine with bronzeware." Everyone was shocked when they heard the words. They had released the news of strong wine for almost a month, but they didn't take it out for a long time. It caused the Leanly building to be criticized recently. Some people even said that osmanthus wine was a flower wine that only effeminate men would drink. In Shuedong was very angry. She knew that it was the news released by other wineries. But Suli had too many things recently, which led to the postponement of the new wine. She could only helplessly watch many drinkers of the Leanly building being taken away by other wineries. While thinking, In Shuedong had followed Suli to the huge bronzeware, which was as high as a person. Usually, she was busy with the shopkeeper's affairs and didn't look at it carefully. Today, she could look at it carefully. This utensil was composed of 2 parts. There was a groove near the top and bottom of the utensil. At the bottom of the groove, there was a drainage pipe which was connected to another large wine jar. "Boss, how to use this thing?" Haydn was confused. Not only him, but In Shuedong and Fong Ling also touched this weird utensil for the first time. They didn't know how Suli would use it to make wine. Suli smiled slightly and waved to Haydn. "You bring a few jars of wine and pour them into the utensil. In Su, come over and heat the utensil. Keep the fire big." The temperature in the room quickly rose, but it didn't exceed the tolerable limit. In Su wiped the hot sweat on his head. He turned his head and saw the dense vents on the wall. He admired Suli more when he realized it. Master's wisdom is really unfathomable. I'm afraid that when designing this building, you have considered the ventilation problem. Otherwise, the temperature in the room will be much higher. Clatter. Haydn didn't let In Shuedong and Fong Ling do it. He took people to pour jars of turbid rice wine into the utensil one after another. Soon there were a bunch of empty jars in the corner of the room. Until the utensil was 80% full. Suli let Haydn stop and covered the utensil with a special cover. "Then what are we going to do?" Haydn still remembered that the process of making osmanthus wine was very tedious. Since it was the new wine of the Leanly building, there should be more complicated steps. Suli shook her head and chuckled. "Next, we just wait." Haydn was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but scratch his head. He stood aside and watched In Su make the fire. He didn't speak. After a while, Fong Ling, who had been staring at the drainage tube, suddenly shouted, Look, the wine is out." Hearing the sound, everyone looked away. They saw a clear liquid flowing out of the drainage tube, which was completely different from the turbid rice wine that was poured in before. "Is this wine? It doesn't look like it. Is it water?" Everyone was confused and whispered. Suli walked to the big wine jar and filled it with a wine cup. Then she put it on the table beside. In Shuedong and others immediately surrounded her. "It turns out to be a white wine with amber color. It's so beautiful." In Shuedong's eyes brightened. He couldn't help but pick up the wine cup and sniff it. In an instant, a strong fragrance of wine assailed his nose. "It's so fragrant. It's different from the osmanthus wine. It's a pure wine fragrance." At this time, Suli took 2 more cups of wine and put them on the table. She looked at Haydn and others who were suppressing the wine worms in their stomachs with a faint smile. "Drink it? As long as you don't get drunk after drinking this cup, I won't deduct your wages." "Boss, do you mean it?" Haydn asked with a happy face. He had a good capacity for liquor. It was impossible for him to get drunk after tasting a cup of wine. In Shuedong was vigilant and gently put down the wine cup. She had been cheated by Suli. Every time Suli showed such an expression, she must not be too confident about her ability. When I go back on my words, Suli signaled Haydn and others with her eyes. Drink it if you want. After today, there won't be such a good thing. Thank you for the reward, boss. Haydn didn't doubt her and immediately picked up the wine cup and drank it up. Then Yin Xuedong and Fong Ling saw his face became red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Cough, cough. It's so spicy. Haydn scratched his throat and coughed violently. It seemed that what he drank just now was dynamite. The moment that glass of wine fell into his stomach, it immediately erupted with an unimaginable power. It was like a red-hot knife directly chopping into his heart, and also like a ball of fire burning. The pain was bone-piercing, but it was also inexplicably refreshing. So cool. Haydn's cheeks were red, and he hiccuped with a silly smile on his face. Then he let out an intoxicated sigh. Then he fell to the ground with a plop and was unconscious. Fong Ling was so scared that she jumped back and almost bumped into Yin Su, who climbed out from behind the stove. Yin Xuedong stepped aside and looked at Haydn lying flat on the ground, snoring slightly. She smiled as she had expected. He really couldn't stand a cup of wine. Seeing this, the rest of the people immediately put down the wine cup and didn't dare to drink. But looking at Haydn's happy face, they were curious about the taste of the wine. Suli gently kicked Haydn, who was sleeping on the ground. She shook her head and smiled. This is the result of taking advantage of others. You should remember it. Xuedong, remember it and deduct his salary for this month. Yin Xuedong couldn't help but stick out her tongue and silently remember it. She could already imagine Haydn's crying look when he woke up. At this time, Suli had filled a whole pot of wine. She shook it and said with a smile, "The wine is called the Liehua wine. Like the osmanthus wine, it is divided into 3 grades. The raw pulp is not sold. Otherwise, ordinary people will die of drinking it, and the Leanly building will get into trouble. The first grade of the Liehua wine is diluted to 150%. As for the next 2 grades and the price, Xuedong, you could decide it by yourself." Yin Xuedong immediately took out a notebook and wrote it down for fear of missing something. Her worry about the new wine had already disappeared. The Liehua spirits was really as strong as its name. Even Haydn was drunk after drinking only 1 cup. Didn't the mediocre winery owners who liked to make irresponsible remarks say that the spirits of the Leanly building were sissy? She would like to see who was the sissy tomorrow. After a while, Haydn was carried to rest, and Yin Su returned to the stove to continue burning. Since the new wine would be released tomorrow, it was natural to make more wine. Yin Xuedong scratched on the paper and thought about the price of the new wine. When she saw Suli put on the veil again and was about to go out of the cellar, she suddenly thought of something and quickly stopped Suli. "Wait, Suli, there's still one thing I don't understand." "What?" Suli turned around and saw Yin Xuedong took her hand and walked to another addendum. She asked, "Suli, how to deal with Mei Ruhan? Since you don't want to show your true face in front of her, it means that you don't believe her. There are many secrets in the winery that can't be confessed. What's the use of continuing to cultivate her?" Suli narrowed her eyes slightly and said, "It's not that I don't believe her, but she is different from us." "Different? What's different?" Yin Xuedong subconsciously asked. Then she suddenly thought of something. Her eyes were slightly dim, and she became silent. Suli smiled in a low voice with a meaning that Yin Xuedong couldn't understand. She said, "When she grows up, I will give her a chance to make a choice. She has too little experience. It's too early for her to make a choice now." Yin Xuedong was stunned and watched Suli turn around and leave with the flagon. She didn't know what to feel for a while. Chapter 113. In the early morning of the next day, the Leanly building opened the door to welcome guests as usual. In the morning, the business was very quiet. Only a few drunkards came to the door. Lowly staggered into the door with a flagon. He exuded the fragrance of osmanthus. Since he drank the osmanthus wine that day, he became a loyal supporter of the Leanly building. No matter what the rumors were, he always maintained absolute trust in the Leanly building. Even when other wineries spread unfavorable rumors, He took a large number of people to other wineries to seek justice for the Leanly building. "Mr. Lee, you are here. Please sit down. The new wine is on the market today. Would you like to have a taste?" When the waiter saw Lao Li, he immediately greeted him and said enthusiastically. He was the #1 regular customer of the Leanly building. Almost half of the returning customers in the store were brought by him. "Hiccup, give me the usual wine." Lao Li was still a little confused. He said intermittently. Suddenly, he caught the keyword of the waiter. He immediately became sober and said with surprise, "What did you say?" "The new wine is on the market." When the waiter saw Lao Li's reaction, he immediately laughed cheerfully. He bent sideways and said, "Look." Lao Li immediately looked at the waiter and saw that there were 3 new wooden signs on the wall behind the counter. They were hanging next to the osmanthus wine. "The first-class Liehua wine is as fierce as fire. You will be drunk with a cup of wine. The price is 10,000 taels per pot. The second-class Liehua wine is mellow and sweet. It is a rare wine. The price is 100 taels per pot. The third-class Liehua wine is pure and transparent. It is fragrant and warm. The price is 1,000 taels per pot." After reading it, Lao Li couldn't help but wipe his eyes and look again. He was right. The price of the new wine of the Leanly building was so low. With the osmanthus wine, almost all the people in the Chinga town knew that the wine of the Leanly building was particularly expensive. It was almost 10 times more expensive than that of ordinary wineries. However, if the price of the first-class and second-class Liehua wine was ignored, the price of the third-class Liehua wine was completely acceptable. Are those wineries right? The Leanly building can't produce new wine, so they introduced the wine of ordinary wineries? Lao Li frowned. If so, he would rather the Leanly building only sell osmanthus wine than lower the level of the Leanly building. With this idea, Lao Li was quite perturbed and ordered a pot of third-class Liehua wine and a bowl of the simplest dish, peanuts. After a short and long wait, Yin Shuedong personally brought over the blazer wine. Lao Li was instantly overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, and he was just about to stand up when he was stopped by Yin Shuedong. "Mr. Li, you're an old customer of the Leanly building. Thank you for taking care of the Leanly building. I see that your body and bones are weak. The Liehua wine is too strong, even if it's third class. I advise you to drink less." After that, Yin Shuedong turned around and left. Although she had diluted the raw pulp according to Su Li's instructions, she was still afraid of accidents, so she couldn't help but come to remind Su Li. Hearing the shopkeeper's concern, old Li's heart warmed. Soon after, his gaze fell onto the wine pot in front of him, and he lightly poured a cup. The clear and transparent amber-colored wine flowed into the cup, causing old Li to be stunned. The Inferno wasn't an ordinary turbid wine. It was as clear and transparent as the osmanthus wine, and its color was much lighter than the osmanthus wine. He moved closer to smell it. The rich and mellow fragrance of the wine assailed his nostrils. It was the fragrance of the wine itself, not the fragrance of any flowers. Lao Li's eyes were shining, and he was excited to drink. The Leanly building really didn't let him down. They really developed the pure wine that belonged to the Leanly building. Gulp. Old Li raised his wine cup and drank it in one gulp. The spicy wine immediately poured down his throat, stimulating old Li to the point he couldn't help but choke and cough. He didn't expect that merely the lowest grade of Liehua spirits would be so spicy and strong. After the stimulation, a warm feeling rose in old Li's stomach, as if there was really a ball of fire burning in his abdomen. His limbs, which had been cold since he woke up, immediately warmed up, and even his back was slightly sweating. So it turns out that when the wine is strong, it can really drive away the coldness like raging fire. Liehua wine, wonderful, wonderful. Old Li drank by himself in high spirits. Soon, his face turned red, and he was drunk. Just then, a middle-aged man walked into the shop. When the man saw old Li, he immediately quickened his pace and sat to the side. "Old Li, you are really drinking here. Of course, I will live in the Leanly building for the rest of my life. What are you doing here?" Seeing that old Li was a little tongue-tied, his face was red, and his eyes were wandering. The middle-aged man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "You are an old drunkard. How can you get drunk after drinking the light osmanthus wine? Don't you boast that you can drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk? Well, don't pretend. I just found a new winery. The wine there is much stronger than osmanthus wine. Hurry up and come with me." "No, I won't go." Oldly flicked his sleeves, and the middle-aged man looked a little embarrassed. He came to invite Oldly to drink good wine with good intentions, but Oldly didn't know what was good for him. At this time, Oldly picked up the flagon at hand and approached the middle-aged man. He smirked and said, "You smell it. If I drink the osmanthus wine, I promise you that I will never come to the Leanly building in my life." The middle-aged man heard the words and laughed. He immediately said, "Oldly, you are finally enlightened. The osmanthus wine is simply a little thing for women to drink. We men should drink something exciting." Then he was about to put down the flagon, but at this time, a trace of mellow fragrance floated from the spout of the flagon. "Well, this is—" The middle-aged man couldn't help but taste it, and then, an hour later, the two drunkards fell down at the table. In order not to affect the business of the shop, Inshuedong quickly ordered the waiter to move them to the guest room to rest. When the middle-aged man was moved, he was alarmed and immediately began to talk nonsense. "The biggest mistake I, Chong Lin, have made in my entire life was listening to rumors. I actually thought that the Leanly building could not make other good wine except osmanthus wine. Raging Fire, this wine is really wild like a horse, and it should show the true colors of a man. I really want to taste the wine that costs 10,000 taels per pot." Burp. Lin Chong's voice became lower and gradually could not be heard. The two waiters snickered and said nothing. At the same time, a strong sense of pride and belonging rose in their hearts. The taste of the Raging Fire wine was excellent. The drinkers spread the news. Soon, all the drinkers in the Qinghe town knew that the new wine of the Leanly building was on the market. This time, it was a real mellow wine without any fancy things. Moreover, the price was almost the same as that of other wineries. It was quite cheap. When the old drinkers of the Leanly building heard the news, they all took their drinking tools to buy wine, for fear that it would be sold out if they were late. The surging flow of people turned from the main street to the second-class street, which became a wonder in the Qinghe town. When Yin Shishuen heard the news, he immediately sent officers and soldiers to maintain order and express his appreciation. Chu Qingning stood beside the cabinet and looked at the long line of people buying wine to the end of the street. He couldn't help but say, "Xuetong, the price you set is too low. We can't earn enough. Aren't you afraid that Suli will blame you?" In Xuetong's eyes flashed with slyness. She whispered with a smile, "Don't worry. It's just temporary. It won't be long before someone begs me to increase the price. Believe it or not." Chu Qingning's face trembled slightly. He looked around with a little panic and then said, "Don't you find that your words and deeds are becoming more and more like Su Li? Don't be like that, Tigress. You know that before?" "Know what?" Su Li's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Chu Qingning's face instantly froze. He slowly turned around and saw Su Li dressed as Mr. Li. He could only smile and flatter. "Before, you destroyed the tiger village with your hands. You are really heroic. I admire you very much." "Ha ha!" Looking at Chu Qingning's flattering expression, In Xuedong laughed happily. She saw the rule. Every time Chu Qingning said something bad, it would be heard by people who shouldn't listen. If there was a so-called special ability in the world, Chu Qingning's special ability was probably the most unlucky one. Su Li's reaction was indifferent. She no longer paid attention to Chu Qingning, who was joking. She looked at In Xuetong with undisguised appreciation in her eyes and said, "Xuetong, you did a good job this time." "Yes." In Xuetong's eyes brightened. Hearing Su Li's praise, she seemed to be full of vigor and inexhaustible strength. It was the first time for her to be praised by Su Li like this. The Leanly building was busy until late at night. The last drinker was sent away and the Leanly building was closed. In Xuetong was so excited that she couldn't sleep. Today, the income of the Leanly building was not much. It could even be said that it had regressed compared to before. The process of making the Liehua spirits was not complicated, and the raw materials were not as expensive as the osmanthus wine. However, the price she set was quite low, which led to a meager profit. But Inshuedong believed that everything was temporary. In the night, Suli sat on the windowsill of the attic with a pot of wine hanging on her side. Her pitch-black eyes were looking at the equally pitch-black night, and no one knew what she was thinking. Tap, tap. Fang Yuan pushed the door open and didn't see anyone at the desk. He sniffed and turned his eyes to see Su Li's lazy appearance. He couldn't help but frown. Why do you start a drink? Su Li tilted her head and looked into the room. She smiled and said, when did I not drink? But there was no wine to drink before. Now I can barely drink the Liehua spirits. Fang Yuan said helplessly, but you can't drink the raw wine as water. Even if you're in the inborn realm, you'll be drunk. Su Li smiled silently, and her cheeks turned pink. The girl under the moonlight seemed to exude a mysterious and tempting atmosphere. At this moment, Fang Yuan's heart beat faster and his ears turned red. In a hazy mind, he vaguely began to realize that it might be a mistake to be tempted, but everything was out of his control. Fang Yuan turned his eyes away and stopped looking at Su Li. He forced his voice to calm down. There is no movement from Wu Yun. It seems that after the killer died last time, she was afraid to take action. When it came to business, the pink on Su Li's face gradually faded, and her eyes became clear. She took a deep breath and said, no, I can understand Wu Yun's eyes. She is not a timid person. Maybe she has started to act, and we don't know it. Fang Yuan was surprised. It seemed that Su Li had never paid so much attention to a person, especially a woman, even when she dealt with Mam. Su Chui in the Daisu town, she never showed such a cautious expression. The deep courtyard of a rich and powerful family is a good place to practice intrigue. Su Li's eyes were gloomy. It's like raising poisonous insects. The Gong family is equivalent to a poisonous insect field, and Wu Yun is the last surviving king of poisonous insects. Do you think the king of poisonous insects is easy to deal with? Fang Yuan looked serious and no longer dared to despise Wu Yun. His Fang family was also an aristocratic family of the poisonous insect clan. How could he not know the power of the king of poisonous insects? That's it. But our intelligence ability is limited. If Wu Yun knows to be cautious, it will be a waste of time for us to investigate. Su Li jumped down from the windowsill and said, prepare for these 2 days and go with me. At this time, Fang Yuan frowned slightly. What if something happened to the Linli building at such a critical moment? Chapter 114. For 3 days in a row, the transaction volume of the Linli building was high. In addition, In Shuedong introduced the strategy of limiting the purchase, so those businessmen who wanted to buy low and sell high could not make profits. The Liehua spirits were too good and cheap. Even if it was a third-class spirit, its value was far more than 1 tael of silver. The ordinary wineries in the Qinghe town were not competitive at all. In just 3 days, their profits shrank by more than half. If it went on like this, they would not be far from bankruptcy. The winery owners were all panicked. When they thought of what they had done before, they were more afraid. The Linli building is simply ruthless. It's too vicious. If I had known it, I wouldn't have spread rumors everywhere. Now, if they really developed the spirits, how could we survive? Why don't you think about the consequences of what you have done? Now we are in trouble with you. How will you compensate us? Ho ho! You know to speak at this time? You didn't stop us when we did it before. Seeing that a group of winery owners were about to fight, the old man sitting in the middle finally couldn't help but hit the table and said angrily, shut up. In an instant, the voice in the room was quiet. The old man obviously had a high reputation in this group. He glanced at the people present with his eyes full of vicissitudes and said, everyone, the business world is like a battlefield. The winner takes all, and the loser takes all. Speaking of this, the old man sighed and said, Mo Honggong is inferior to the Linli building in the winemaking skill. The Qinghe winery is not as good as the Linli building. There is nothing to talk about. I don't want to talk about the dirty things you have done before. The Leanly building is annoyed by you and deliberately lowers the price so that you have no business to do. In my opinion, it is reasonable. But if it goes on like this, it will affect the prosperity of the winemaking industry in the Qinghe town. So, I propose to reconcile with Mr. Li through satrap yen. What do you think? Mo Hongong's words were reasonable and made everyone silent. They also knew that they were wrong. But if they apologized to a young woman who was more than 10 years younger than them, wasn't it too difficult? Mo Hongong was not in a hurry. He sat there with his eyes closed, waiting for everyone's response. After an unknown period of time, a dejected owner finally stood up and sighed. I agree with Venerable Mo's proposal. This winery is my life. If it's gone, my family will have nothing to eat. A mistake is a mistake. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Someone took the lead to admit defeat. Immediately, an acquaintance nodded and said, I also agree. I was wrong this time. I should give Mr. Li an explanation. Not bad. Me too. I don't agree. What right does a silly little girl have to make me apologize? After a heated discussion, Mo Hongong took 90% of the people to the county governor's mansion, leaving only a few particularly vile wineries still stubbornly resisting. They knew what they had done, and even if they went to the county governor for help, they would not necessarily be forgiven. In that case, why would they go and humiliate themselves? County Governor Yin was under great pressure from the Jean family and the Lin family. He was surprised when a group of winery owners suddenly came to him. Yes, how could I forget that I can also ask Mr. Li for help? Yin Shixuan was delighted. Many industries of the Yin family were under vicious competition, so he had to do business at a loss. He had lost hundreds of thousands of taels these days, and the liquidity was about to run out. Venerable Mo, I will negotiate with Mr. Li on this matter. However, I think that if you want to show your sincerity, it's better to let the winery owners jointly write a letter of apology and post it on the bulletin board to restore the credibility of the Leanly building. In this way, the Leanly building will definitely let bygones be bygones and will not be ruthless. As soon as he said that, the faces of the winery owners who followed him changed. Mo Hongong's expression did not change. He nodded naturally and said, It should be so. I also have the same idea. Mr. Li is a divine doctor and kind-hearted. This time he must be angry. If there is a letter of apology, it is enough to appease Mr. Li's anger. Hearing that, Yin Shixuan laughed loudly and said, Venerable Mo, you are really well informed. Then he turned his eyes to a group of winery owners. His face suddenly became cold, and he said, Mr. Li once saved my son's life. To be honest, if you use violent means, I would have already taken action. It can be regarded as a favor to Mr. Li. Now, you are not even willing to write a letter of apology? Do you really want to taste the feeling of being in prison? Hearing that, the winery owners all turned pale and said that they dared not. They couldn't get in touch with people like Satrap Yen. How could they know that Mr. Li had other identities? If they had known that the Satrap's mansion was behind the Leanly building, they would not have dared to offend the Leanly building. Lord, we have written a letter of apology. Please calm down. Lord, please calm down. By the way, the Qingzhou Winery and the Wincy Winery are not here. They are the culprits who spread the rumors. Seeing that the winery owners changed their minds instantly, Yin Shixuan sneered in his heart. But he still looked calm and said lightly, You just do your own things. Don't get involved in the affairs of the two wineries. Under the instruction of Mo Hongong, a group of winery owners tremblingly wrote a letter of apology and posted it on the most conspicuous place on the bulletin board. Soon, it attracted the attention of the people in the city. For a time, it was talked about with relish. It turns out that the rumors of the Leanly building are false. The other wineries are jealous and spread the rumors. They are really irrational. Satrap Yin is really a good official. Ordinary people pointed at it and gossiped, but many people also noticed the hidden message of the letter of apology. The Satrap's mansion is behind the Leanly building? I didn't expect that Mr. Li is so influential that even Satrap Yin has to take the initiative to make friends. I am afraid that the price of the Liehua spirits will rise soon. Don't you see that the winery owners are so anxious that they even take out a joint letter of apology? When Yin Shuedong heard the news, she felt relieved and smiled. This time, with the help of Satrap Yin, the plan for the Liehua spirits was a great success. In the future, no one would doubt the fact that the Linley building was the first winery in the Qinghe town. Half a day after the notice came out, the Linley building quickly changed the wooden sign. The price of all grades of the Liehua spirits was increased by 10 times, which was the same price as the osmanthus wine. The winery owners who got the news were relieved. Finally, their industry was saved. The drinkers cursed, not the Linley building, but the wineries. If the wineries hadn't forced them, the Linley building would not have changed the price back to the original price. But now, they had no ability to change the price of the Linley building. They could only complain and continue to drink in the Linley building. When other wineries were celebrating, Yin Shishuan secretly came to the Linley building. Alone, Su Li raised her eyebrows and said to Yin Shishuan with a smile, "Satrap Yin, are you kidding? With the financial accumulation of the Yin family for many years, it should be able to compete with the Jin family and the Lin family for half a month, right?" Yin Shishuan was shocked when he heard the words. Then, he found that Misli seemed to know the details of the aristocratic families in the Qinghe town too well. Misli could even guess the foundation of their families. But he had come here and was ready to tell the whole story. So, Yin Shishuan didn't go into it. She sighed and explained, "Misli, you don't know that the accumulation of the Jin family and the Lin family is indeed more than that of the Yin family, but not too much. Logically speaking, I can hold on for half a month or even longer. But this time is very different." Yin Shishuan frowned and thought of the impact of his industry these days. He said, "The Jin family and the Lin family are completely desperate. They lower the price indiscriminately, which leads to the serious loss of liquidity of the Yin family. I suspect that there are other families involved. However, I have checked the capital flow of the Rand family and the Qin family these days, but they didn't help us." Su Li's eyes flashed, and she said in a low voice, "Other families?" "Yes." Yin Shishuan's face was full of certainty. "Moreover, it's a force with great financial resources. If it's really only the Jin clan and the Lin clan, they'll destroy themselves before the Yin clan falls. It doesn't make sense at all." Su Li thought and suddenly said, "Satrap Yin, have you heard of the name Wu Yin?" Yin Shishuan was shocked and said, "Of course I have. What do you mean?" "Nothing. I just asked casually." Su Li seemed to ask casually and immediately changed the topic. "Satrap Yin, how much are you going to borrow today?" Yin Shishuan secretly remembered the name Wu Yin. Then he raised his head and said earnestly, "The more the better. I don't believe that the help of the people behind the Jin family and the Lin family is infinite. As long as I can hold on, the final victory will be mine. Here, I also promise you that I will share the fruits of victory with you and will never embezzle them." Su Li smiled and said, "Since Satrap Yin said so, I have no reason not to help you. It is enough for the Linley building to open a winery. It doesn't need too many industries. But I will have more and more people in the future. The place of the Linley building is a little small. If Satrap Yin can allocate the residents of the Jin family to the Linley building, I will be very grateful." Yin Shishuan's pupils shrank slightly. Why did he feel that Misli was determined to get the residents of the Jin family? Did she also want to intervene in this matter? However, no matter what the meaning of the words was, as long as the Yin family could win, everything else was not a problem. "Misli, you are really serious. If I can really stand in the end, the residents of the Jin family will be yours to live." In the room, there was a cheerful laughter of an old man and a young man. After 5 minutes, Yin Shishuan took a heavy bag of banknotes and left the Linley building in horror. A total of 1 million circulating taels. Is it the profit of the Linley building in the past 6 months or the foundation of the Linley building? He used to be a person in the martial arts circle. The more he thought about Su Li, the more frightened he was. He was so scared that he didn't dare to think about it. At night, in the martial arts field of the school, Yin Hongxiu stroked the silver longbow with joy on her face. Recently, she seemed to be able to feel the emotion of the silver bow. It seemed that the silver bow was no longer a dead thing, but a living person who could communicate with her. Can you finally communicate with the spiritual bow preliminarily? A strange voice suddenly came from behind. Yin Hongxiu immediately turned around and said with surprise, "Immortal Master, you are here." Suli nodded gently and said, "Now try to pull the bow." Yin Hongxiu immediately stood up straight and pulled the bowstring according to her words. She immediately pulled the bowstring a little bit. Although the extent was not obvious, Yin Hongxiu was ecstatic. She couldn't pull the bowstring at all before. It seemed that the bowstring of the silver bow was simply made of stone and had no elasticity at all. "Very good." Su Li praised her generously. "You have been preliminarily recognized by the spiritual bow. Next, let your father buy more blood-enriching herbs and put them at home." Yin Hongxiu was stunned and looked confused. What did the blood-enriching herbs have to do with her archery practice? "Next, you need to smear the spiritual bow with your own blood every day. You can't rest for a day. I will teach you a pithy formula. When you smear the blood, you can't stop it. Do you understand?" Yin Hongxiu trembled when she heard it. What was this strange method? She should use her blood to control the longbow. The method of blood refining. Chapter 115. Yin Hongxiu bit her lower lip and lowered her head. Her father was a third-grade official in the Dahan country. Her mother came from a family of scholars and merchants. She didn't have to worry about food and clothing since she was a child. She was constantly instilled with traditional ideas by her mother and sisters. But her character still followed her father's. She had the same desire for martial arts as her third brother. She longed for the chivalrous and free Jianghu that her brother said. If she couldn't pull the bow, would she really be willing to marry someone else's wife when she reached the age where she could take care of her husband and children and be trapped in a small world for the rest of her life? No, she was not willing. Yin Hongxiu raised her head and her eyes became firm again. She said, "Immortal Master, please teach me the pithy formula." Su Li slightly pursed her lips and said coldly, "Have you really thought it through? You are too young. What you see and yearn for is not what you want. Even so, do you still want to continue?" Yin Hongxiu still nodded and said, "I don't know whether it is right or not. But if I give up now, I will regret it later. In this case, I can't flinch." Then Yin Hongxiu stared at Su Li closely. Su Li's cold tone suddenly changed and became lively. She said, "It is rare that you have such awareness at such a young age. In this case, I will teach you the pithy formula now." "Yes, Immortal Master." Yin Hongxiu nodded happily and finally returned to her usual smile. Looking at the pretty girl holding the long bow in front of her, Su Li showed a meaningful smile. The method of blood refinement was a commonly used method in the martial arts world to refine weapons, but not everyone could succeed in this method. Moreover, if one refined a spiritual weapon that was much higher than his cultivation, he was likely to suffer a backlash and die or be disabled. However, Su Li believed that Yin Hongxiu could safely get through the danger. After all, under the torture of Jin Sheng Ao in the previous life, Yin Hongxiu refined the spiritual bow with her heart blood. She completely mastered the spiritual bow in only 3 days and almost killed Jin Sheng Ao. Unfortunately, she lost too much heart blood. Yin Hongxiu didn't shoot the last arrow and left first. At that time, Su Li had speculated that the bow must be the ancestral heirloom of the Yin family, and the snow vein in Yin Hongxiu's body was likely to be very suitable for the bow. Otherwise, even if she worked hard, it was impossible for her to completely master the killing weapon that was a big realm beyond her cultivation in just 3 days. In this life, she asked Yin Hongxiu to choose a safer method of blood refining. Although it was a little slow, Yin Hongxiu would be able to regain the brilliance of her previous life and time. You died prematurely in your previous life and didn't have the chance to shine in the martial arts world. Let me help you in this life. Consider it a return gift from the Yin clan for helping me wipe out the Jin clan. In the warm night breeze, white clothes fluttered and various fates were silently changing in the silence. Early the next morning, Su appeared in Wen Ruomin's yard. "You want to go out and relax?" Hearing Su Li's words, Wen Ruomin couldn't help but frown slightly. She couldn't help but worry. The Qinghe town is not peaceful these days. Your class is also delayed because of this. I don't object to you going out, but how are we going to solve the problem of safety? Thank you for your concern, Dean. Su seemed to have a well-thought-out plan and said softly, "I also know my situation. Yesterday, I have invited bodyguards from the Tianya house to go with me. Besides, there are also Xiaowu and Datian. I believe that there will be no problem. The bodyguards of the Tianya house are really powerful." Wen Ruomin immediately felt relieved and smiled. "In the past 6 months, you spent all day here except going back home. You really should go out for a walk. It happens that Dean Gong has just recovered from her illness and is asking me to go to class. You can relax and don't worry about the schedule." "Dean," Su looked grateful and said, "It's really my luck to meet Dean Wen. Don't worry, Dean. I just want to go to the Qinghe River to relax. I believe that I will come back within a month." "That's good. The scenery of the Qinghe River is good. You should go and have a look." Wen Ruomin smiled and took out an amulet from her arms and gave it to Su Li. "This is the amulet I asked from the temple. Take it and be careful on the way." Su Li quickly retreated and felt flattered. She said, "How can I take it?" "Dean, keep it with you. Just take it." Wen Ruomin pretended to be unhappy and said, "Nothing will happen to me if I stay in the school. If you care about it, you can give it back to me when you come back. Take it with ease." Su Li hesitated for a moment and finally listened to Wen Ruomin. She put the amulet close to her body and was told to pay attention to the trifles on the way. Then she was led out of the yard. In front of the school, Mammy Li was waiting beside the carriage with a small bag. Xiaowu and Datian were both excited and checked whether the food prepared for the horses was enough. After a while, Su Li walked out of the school. When she saw Mammy Li and others waiting, she couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. She finally saw Wen Ruomin's nagging ability. If she didn't say that the carriage was waiting in front of the school, she didn't know how long she would be pulled by Wen Ruomin. However, she didn't feel tired of this level of verbosity. Instead, she felt a faint warmth lingering in her heart. If it were in the previous life, she wouldn't be shaken at all. Compared with the time when she was just reborn, she seems to be more and more like a normal person. Is it good or bad? Su Li sighed softly and sat in the carriage. Xiaowu immediately drove away from the school. When the carriage left the Qinghe town, Xiaowu was about to ask Su Li where the so-called guards were. Suddenly, he heard the sound of hooves behind him. In the blink of an eye, 4 horses followed. There were 3 men and 1 woman on the horses. All of them wore masks, and their faces couldn't be seen clearly. They didn't look like guards. They were more likely to be killers. Xiaowu panicked and was about to turn around and escape. But he heard Su Li's voice from behind, "Don't panic. The 4 of them are all guards invited by me. You can continue to go as usual." Xiaowu couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the words. He couldn't help but look at the horse walking in the front. The voice of the young man on the horse immediately came from behind the mask. "You go now. I will follow and protect you all the way." Hearing the voice, Xiaowu was finally sure that they were not killers. Then, an unprecedented sense of security hit his whole body. With the protection of such 4 seemingly powerful people, it would be no problem for them to go back to their hometown. After a whole day's journey, there was no official road in the end of the carriage. The mountain road between the slope was very rugged. After dark, they couldn't see the road clearly. The horses also couldn't bear it, so they could only clear a relatively flat, open space and temporarily rest for the night. Xiaowu saw Feng Yuan and others easily move the stones and cleared all the shrubs around quickly. He couldn't help but be speechless. As expected, they deserved to be the bodyguards of the Tianya house. The speed of clearing the camp was really professional. Su Li sat on a stone and watched quietly. A faint fluorescent light flashed in her eyes. Whether it was Feng Yuan, Chu Qingning, Feng Mu, or Yin Xuedong, they all had been on the battlefield and killed enemies. Setting up a camp was the basic skill of marching. They were naturally familiar with it. Before it was completely dark, Feng Yuan, and Chu Qingning had already set up all the tents. In Xuedong and Feng Mu also picked up bundles of firewood. After making a fire, the surrounding site was suddenly illuminated. The fire was very warm on their faces. Xiao took out the pot from the carriage and put it on the fire. He poured water into it. When the pot opened, he put in the dried jerky. Soon, the smell of meat floated out of the pot. He first filled a bowl for Su Li and then walked to Feng Yuan with the bowl in his hand. Eldest brother, you worked hard on the road. Here you are. Looking at Xiao Wu's respectful expression with a trace of fear, Feng Yuan smiled slightly. He took the soup bowl and lifted half of his mass to drink. Su Li didn't allow him to show his real face. It was not a big deal to only show his mouth, right? Chu Qingning and other two people immediately followed him and lifted their masks to drink. Xiao was stunned to see this scene. Why didn't this group of people take off their masks, even when eating? He also wanted to see what the four people looked like. It was very peaceful at night, and there was only the crackling sound of burning firewood. After all, Xiao Wu, Datian, and Mammy Li were ordinary people. After a day of hard work and eating and drinking, they immediately felt sleepy. It didn't take long for them to get into the tent and sleep. After making sure that the three people fell asleep, Feng Yuan and others took off their masks to breathe. Su Li picked up the burning firewood with a branch and asked, "How about the arrangement before we left?" Chu Qingning glanced at the tent behind him and signaled In Xuedong to speak. In Xuedong organized her words and whispered, "Everything is arranged." The girl is very flustered, but Luo Yichen will come back soon. I believe that there will be no big trouble. Su Li said, and narrowed her eyes slightly. You are all from aristocratic families and have extraordinary backgrounds. Do you think, if the Linli building wants to fight with forces like the royal family of the Nanjiang country in the future, what are the chances of winning? The four people were shocked when they heard the words, and their expressions were different. Only Feng Yuan's expression didn't change. He had already seen all kinds of magic of Su Li. It was not the first time that he saw such an inexplicable ability to get secret information. Miss Su Li, you're not from the Nanjiang country. How do you know that our enemy is the royal family? Feng Mu was still a little impulsive. In the face of Su Li's sudden question, he couldn't help but blurt out the question. Did the eldest brother tell you? No, the eldest brother clearly told. Speaking of this, Feng Mu realized something and immediately stopped the second half of the sentence. Su Li was very interested and asked, "What did he tell you?" Feng Mu, it's not a good boy to say things halfway. What do you think? Feng Mu subconsciously looked at Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan's mouth twitched slightly. This boy, did he deliberately trick him? You don't need to say it. I can guess what the explanation is. Su Li said with a smile. It's nothing more than hiding something about the royal family from me. After all, even if I am powerful, I will never offend a country for no reason. If I know it, I will probably drive you away, right? Feng Mu's face suddenly turned pale, and In Xuedong was also worried. She looked at Su Li nervously with her beautiful eyes. They didn't expect that the relationship with Su Li would be on the verge of breaking just after they went out for a day. Chu Qingning smiled, and his eyes were rarely cold. He shrugged and said, "Since you have laid your cards on the table, Su Li, what do you think about the Nanjiang country?" "I don't have any idea." Su Li tilted her head and supported her arm on the stone. She propped up half of her cheek and said in a lazy tone as if she didn't pay attention to the serious atmosphere in front of her, "You have people you want to deal with, and so do I. Moreover, the enemy's forces are so powerful that I can't face them alone. I can only build forces to fight against them. That's why I've never cared about your origins. It's not because I'm aware of it, but because this is a transaction in itself." As Su Li said, she drew on the ground with a branch and pointed to Feng Yuan. "You help me kill people, and then in return, I help you destroy the royal family of the Nanjiang country. It is a fair deal, isn't it?" The calm words passed through the hearts of the four people. In Xuedong and Feng Mu felt cold at the same time, as if they could smell the endless blood brewing under the words. No, it's not fair. Chapter 116. My Enemy, A dim light flashed in Su Li's eyes, and she immediately chuckled. I don't know, but have you ever seen me make a losing deal? You just need to know that I will not suffer a loss in this deal. That's enough. Fan Yuan's heart sank. She still didn't want to say it. However, from the analysis of the meaning of Su Li's words, he gained something. At least, Su Li's enemy would not be worse than the royal family of Nanjiang country. Let's not talk about these unhappy things. Su Li sat up straight with a smile on her face, as if the confrontation just now did not exist at all. She said, I asked, with the current strength of the Linli building, what are the odds of winning against the royal family of Nanjiang country? 0. Chu Qingning said the answer without hesitation. He said, the royal family has an army, and the palace is heavily guarded. There are many inborn realm practitioners. Even if we all advance to the inborn realm, we may not be able to carry out the beheading plan. As for the minions of the Linli building, they're even more useless. Qingning is right. Yin Xuedong nodded and said in a deep voice, I have heard in the clan elders meeting that the royal family is stronger than what Qingning said. Our current strength is just a non-entity in the eyes of the royal family. Even if we secretly attack them, we are far from their opponents. You still have some self-awareness. Su Li smiled slightly and took out 4 pieces of thin paper and put them in front of the 4 people. She said, don't think about revenge for the time being. It is imperative to do our best to strengthen ourselves. AO sword skills. Chu Qingning read it out and couldn't help but feel pity. He said, I practice the saber, so I can't use it directly. It can only be used as a reference. Fan Yuan roughly read the AO sword skills, and his expression suddenly became cautious. This was definitely an extremely profound practice method. He boasted that he had read countless sword books in the family, but none of them was more difficult than this one. Hide it close to your body. Su Li took out the Liehua spirits hidden somewhere and took a sip. She said carelessly, if it is leaked, we will all be in big trouble. The sword skills are divine, and people above the inborn realm will snatch it when they see it. It is not rubbish. As soon as the words came out, the 4 people's faces trembled violently. They immediately hid the thin paper close to their body and then looked around vigilantly. Don't worry, there's no one around. Su Li put down the wine gourd and said with a faint smile, if any of you can practice to the 3rd hurdle of the sword skills or understand the 3rd hurdle, I will try my best to help him break through the inborn hurdle and become a young master. This agreement is valid until you are 20 years old. Fan Yuan's heart couldn't stop beating fiercely. He had already reached the acquired 9th hurdle. If he went one step further, he would reach the peak of the acquired 9th hurdle. He was only 1 step away from the inborn hurdle. If he could break through the inborn hurdle, he could at least catch up with Su Li and not fall behind too much. Chu Qingning and others also blushed. The temptation was too great. Being a young master was something that they didn't even think about. After all, even in their families, no one could help people break through the inborn hurdle naturally. Everything depended on personal qualifications and opportunities. But Su Li said that she had a way. If this matter was spread to the martial arts circle, it would inevitably cause a great disturbance, and the Linli building would never be peaceful. Yin Xuedong and Chu Qingning looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. Don't think too much. I have no way to help you break through the inborn hurdle. Su Li seemed to see through their thoughts and pointed to their chests. It's the magical effect brought by this sword skills. The 3rd hurdle is a threshold. If you can understand it, it will be easy for you to break through the inborn hurdle. I can help you at most. Where did you get this sword technique from? Fan Yuan frowned and asked. Su Li used to make elixirs to help them practice. Everything she did was constantly strengthening the strength of the Linli building. If she had it long ago, it was impossible to take it out now. Do you remember Jin, Chang'ao? Su Li pointed to the direction of the Qinghe town. Thanks to him, I can get this treasure. It turns out that you deliberately deal with him for the AO sword skills. Fan Yuan was shocked. Where did Su Li get the information of the AO sword skills? All the doubts seemed to go back to the original point and couldn't be explained. Half of the half. I'm just getting some stuff while I'm taking my revenge. Suli chuckled, and a light flashed in her eyes. She said in her heart, I just get a little justice for myself. Fang Yuan was silent. The more Suli said, the more doubts he had. The mystery of the girl in front of him was getting thicker and thicker. The sky was bright. After a good sleep, Mammy Li was full of energy. She got up and heated the dry food for everyone. After eating, they continued their journey. The Qinghe River runs through the whole Dahan country and finally converges into the Donghai Sea. It could be said that half of the people in the Dahan country are raised by the Qinghe River. Xiaowu was very bored on the way, so he told them about his hometown. Our Dawang village is one of the many small villages along the Qinghe River. There are only dozens of families in the village. They usually rely on fishing for a living. Xiaowu said and patted Datian, who was sitting next to him. Datian and I are orphans. We don't know who our parents are. We were picked up and raised by the village head. Later, Uncle Wang, the son of the village head, got married. Datian and I had a hard time. We didn't want the village head to be scolded by Aunt Wang all day, so we left the fishing village. Later, we went to the school to find a job. I didn't expect to meet such a good person as Lecturer Su. Xiaowu briefly talked about his own experience, but deliberately omitted the process from the Wang village to the Qinghe school. Seeing that he smiled brightly, Datian also laughed. He was not as smart as his eldest brother. He usually listened to his eldest brother. As long as his eldest brother was happy, he was happy. They're also poor people. Yin Xuedong sighed secretly, but she didn't have much sympathy. At least Xiaowu and Datian had the village head, but she had nothing before she met Chu Qingning. It took the carriage 4 days to go from the Qinghe town to the Dawang village. During these 4 days, it was not smooth sailing. They encountered many robbers along the mountain road. But those ordinary robbers were no match for Fang Yuan and the other 3 people. They were beaten badly in less than 5 minutes every time, and a large amount of money was extorted. Lecturer Su, don't you control them? Xiaowu and Datian were excited and couldn't help but worry. If they robbed every robber they saw, would they offend too many people? I can't control them even if I want to. After all, they are just escorting me all the way. I am not qualified to restrict their freedom. Suli helplessly spread out her hands, but she was thinking whether she should rob the robbers around the Qinghe town. Why didn't she find that it was faster to make money in this way before? Xiaowu heard Su Li's words and immediately smiled bitterly. However, when he saw Fang Yuan and the other 3 beat the robbers violently, he felt relieved. When he left the village that year, the only silver he had was robbed by the robbers. Now when he saw them being robbed, he felt indescribable pleasure in his heart. Those who rob people will be robbed by others. This group of robbers can be considered karma. Karma is not good. In such a journey of robbing along the way, they finally arrived at Xiaowu's hometown, the Dawang village, on the 5th morning. Suli opened the curtain and saw dozens of houses gathered on the flat sand a few miles away from the seaside. They were surrounded by low stone walls piled with stones. Some of the houses were small and dilapidated thatched huts, and some were tall houses made of cobblestones. From time to time, children could be seen playing and running between the houses, which formed a peaceful and harmonious picture. It was indeed a very small village, as Xiaowu said. Grandpa Hen, I'm back. Xiaowu and Datian were excited and drove the carriage to stop in front of the stone wall gate. People in the Dawang village had never seen such handsome horses and luxuriously decorated carriage. At first glance, they knew that there might be extraordinary guests in the Dawang village. People in the village quickly gathered around. The children were surrounded by their families, and their faces were full of curiosity. Whispers came constantly, but no one dared to go forward to talk. The village head is coming. Suddenly, someone shouted, and the crowd immediately separated to make a way. Xiaowu and Datian looked expectantly, but they saw a short and fat middle-aged man coming from the crowd. Uncle Wang. Xiaowu's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but ask, Uncle, have you become the village head? What happened to Grandpa? Xiaowu and Datian ate well and dressed well under Su Li's care, and their demeanor and momentum were completely different. When the short and fat middle-aged man heard Xiaowu call him Uncle Wang, he was suddenly confused. When did he have such two promising nephews? At this time, a scream came from the crowd. Xiaowu, aren't they Xiaowu and Datian who left the village 3 years ago? As the voice came out, there was a sudden uproar in the crowd. No wonder I find them familiar. They're the two boys adopted by the old village head. Yes, I didn't expect that they would be so good after they went out. Look, their clothes are shining. The short and fat middle-aged man finally reacted. He stared at Xiaowu and asked incredulously, "Are you Xiaowu?" Xiaowu had no time to talk with the short and fat middle-aged man. He looked anxious and said, "Uncle Wang, where's my grandpa? How is grandpa?" Datian was also nervous and asked in a muffled voice. The short and fat middle-aged man immediately gave a hollow laugh. "Your grandpa is fine, but he is old and retired from the position of village head. I'm a village head now. You two come back." Then, the short and fat middle-aged man looked at Su Li and others behind Xiaowu and Datian. He was a little discerning. Just by looking at the clothes of Su Li and others, he knew that the identity of the people brought back by Xiaowu was absolutely extraordinary. Hearing that the short and fat middle-aged man said that grandpa was fine, Xiaowu immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then he thought of Su Li and others, and immediately scratched his head in embarrassment. He turned back and said, "Lady, I am being rude. It doesn't matter. It's human nature." Su Li came forward to comfort him, and then nodded slightly to the short and fat middle-aged man. She said lightly, "Village head Wang, please forgive me for taking the liberty to visit you." No. It's my honor that you can come to such a small place as Dowang Village." Wang Dafu couldn't help wiping the cold sweat on his head, and his legs were slightly trembling. Since he became the village head, the highest status he had seen was just the village head of a nearby big village. The pressure he felt when facing that person was less than 1/10 of that when facing Su Li. Su Li smiled gently. "Village head, don't be nervous. I heard that the scenery along the Qinghe River is good. It happens that Xiaowu grew up along the Qinghe River, so I came here to have a look. I wonder if you can stay in Dowang Village for a period of time. I will give you enough silver." Seeing that Su Li's attitude was very soft, and there was silver to be earned, Wang Dafu was overjoyed. He immediately nodded and said, "Of course. It's my honor that you can live in the village. I have a lot of spare rooms in my house, which are enough for you to live. Please follow me." Wang Dafu immediately led the way in front and began to calculate how much money Su Li would give him. A little money from such a big shot would probably be enough for them to eat for several months. By the way, I don't know the identity of that person. After the joy, Wang Dafu remembered that he didn't ask about Su Li's identity, but he didn't dare to take the initiative to ask. He could only hold it in his heart and wait for a suitable opportunity to ask Xiaowu. Chapter 117. As the head of the village, Wang Dafu's house was really the best. It was the only two-story building built with bluestone in the village. The flat slate covered the path. If she didn't hear the sound of the river from time to time, Su Li would think that she was in the Qinghe town and didn't go out at all. "Woman, come out quickly. A distinguished guest is coming." Wang Dafu shouted with a red face. Immediately, there came the sound of going downstairs upstairs. A middle-aged woman with heavy makeup and a plump figure came out of the building. When she saw Su Li, a hint of disappointment flashed in her eyes. She had long heard that a distinguished guest came to the village, but she didn't expect that it turned out to be a silly girl. It was really a waste of effort to dress up. Thinking of this, the middle-aged woman quickened her pace and came over. She said enthusiastically, "Please come in. No wonder I heard the magpies singing early in the morning. It turns out that this miss is coming." Su Li pursed her lips and didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Xiaowu beside her and said, "Since it's your home, you can make the decision. I'm a little tired. If you have any problem, you can find number 1 and others to solve it." Xiaowu looked around and was worried. When he heard Su Li's words, he suddenly became happy and deeply grateful. He bowed hard and said, "Thank you, lady." Madame Wang obviously didn't recognize Xiao Wu and was confused. Finally, she only caught the words, "Su Li is tired." She immediately stepped aside and said attentively, "Since Miss is tired, why don't you go upstairs and have a rest? The guest room has been prepared." Su Li glanced at Feng Yuan and others and then walked into the building with Mammy Li. As soon as Su Li left, Madame Wang felt much less pressure and looked natural. When she was about to continue to make friends with Feng Yuan and others, Wang Dafu quietly pulled her sleeves behind her. She couldn't help but turn back angrily and whispered, "You have been pulling me since the door opened. The guest is here." Wang Dafu didn't have time to care about his wife's attitude. He hurriedly asked, "Where's my father? That old man?" Of course, he went back. Madame Wang rolled her eyes and did not see Wang Dafu's dramatic change of expression. She turned around and saw Xiao Wu, who had walked to her with a serious face. She immediately praised him. "This child is really handsome. At first glance, I know he is well educated. My Zhua can't compare with him." Xiao Wu sneered and said, "Annie said 3 years ago that I was a bastard who was born by a mother, but raised by no father. How could you forget it so quickly?" Mrs. Wang's smile froze, and she stared at Xiao Wu blankly. Did she hear it wrong? This young man actually called her aunt, and it seemed like he is Xiao Wu. Wang Dafu covered his face and sighed. He had wanted to say a long time ago, but his wife kept saying it, so he couldn't. "Little Wu." Madame Wang screamed, and the rouge on her face fell like lime. Then she shifted her gaze to the side. Is that Datian? Had the 2 little bastards she had chased out grown up, returned to settle scores with her? Thinking of this, Madame Wang's face suddenly turned pale, and she quibbled, "Xiao Wu Datian, 3 years ago, you 2 wanted to leave on your own. Anyway, we raised you up. Is this how you repay kindness with ingratitude? It was my grandfather who raised me, not you." Xiao Wu's eyes were very cold. He said, "Auntie, I don't want to care about the past. If you didn't force me that year, I wouldn't have met Lord Su. Now I come back just to see if my grandfather is well." Xiao Wu looked around and said, "Which room is he in?" Madame Wang's face was very ugly, and she didn't speak for a long time. Xiao Wu saw Madame Wang's reaction, and his expression suddenly changed slightly. He looked at Wang Dafu and said gloomily, "Uncle, you said Grandpa is fine. Is it false?" "Of course not." Wang Dafu quickly waved his hand. Looking at the group of young men and women with cold faces behind Xiao Wu, he immediately said obediently, "But your grandfather doesn't live here." Before entering the Dawang village, Feng Yuan and others had already taken the appearance disguising elixir and took off their masks. For a group of ordinary people who didn't know Xingong, the lowest level of appearance disguising elixir could cover up their appearance. The effect of this appearance disguising elixir could last for a long time. "Doesn't live here?" Xiao Wu heard the words and showed an unbelievable expression on his face. He said, "Uncle, you are my grandfather's only biological son. My grandfather is old and alone. If he doesn't live here, where else can he live?" Wang Dafu looked ashamed and couldn't say it. Xiao Wu's eyes were full of anger. He looked at Madame Wang and said, "Uncle, you drove me and Datian away. Now even your biological father is driven away. Do you have any humanity?" "I didn't drive him away." Wang Dafu quickly waved his hand and looked at Madame Wang with a cowardly expression. Seeing that he was so useless, Madame Wang was so angry that her face turned pale. She pointed at her husband and scolded, "Wang Dafu, you are useless. If you do something wrong, you blame your wife. Can you blame me for your father's departure? It was obviously that old thing who disliked me and left on his own accord. It has nothing to do with me. Enough." Xiao Wu's roar shook the entire 2-story building. Madame Wang was so scared that her body trembled. She immediately kept silent and didn't dare to say anything. "Wang Dafu, take me to see my grandfather?" Xiao Wu looked gloomy and didn't even bother to call him uncle. Wang Dafu shrank his neck and said, "He lives in the old house. If you still remember." "I remember." Xiaowu interrupted Wang Dafu's words and immediately turned around and bowed to Fang Yuan. He said, "Lords, I have something urgent to do." "Excuse me." With Fang Yuan's permission, Xiaowu immediately ran out of the yard. Fang Yuan turned around and said to Fang Mu, "Go with him. Help him if you can." Fang Mu immediately nodded and went out to follow Xiaowu. Suddenly, there were only Fang Yuan, Wang Dafu, and Wang Dafu in the yard. The atmosphere was extremely awkward. Yin Xuedong didn't look at Wang Dafu and Fang Yuan. She changed her voice and said, "It's still early. Why don't we go out together?" She didn't forget Su Li's entrustment before entering the Dawang village. At this moment, she proposed it and immediately got the consent of Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning. They all left the yard in the blink of an eye. Madame Wang stood in the same place for a long time. Suddenly, she tore Wang Dafu's clothes like crazy and said, "It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Didn't you say that the two bastards died outside and wouldn't come back? How come they not only came back, but also got lucky and hooked up with the rich and powerful? Why is it him, not our son?" "Don't hit me." Wang Dafu's clothes were torn. He was in a mess, and several wounds were scratched by Madame Wang's sharp and long nails. "The miss upstairs is still there. Don't hit me." Madame Wang's movement was stiff. She woke up and quickly pulled Wang Dafu's ear into the house. Suli sat by the window upstairs and saw everything from beginning to end. But her expression never changed. "Miss, are we really going to live here?" Mammy Li stood behind Su Li and said angrily, "We said that we would pay. Isn't it convenient for Madame Wang? Let's talk about it later." "Mammy Li, don't worry." Su Li took the original sword book and lowered her head and said lightly. Mammy Li responded. She thought of all kinds of things that Su Li had experienced since she woke up last spring. She gradually calmed down and turned to do other things. Xiaowu and Datian came to the old house according to their memory. Looking at the thatched hut that was about to collapse, their eyes turned red instantly, and they rushed in at the same time. Fang Mu looked at the half-tilted thatched hut and sighed. He bent down and walked in. Under the effect of Su Li's elixir, he was much taller than before. Although it was daytime, the thatched hut's window was small and the light was very dim. Xiaowu bent down and passed through a straw door. He immediately saw the weak old man lying on the bed. It was the old village head that he missed for a long time. "Grandpa." Xiaowu knelt in front of the straw couch and burst into tears. He said, "Grandpa, I am back. I am Xiaowu, Datian, and I have come back to see you." The old man lying on the bed opened his eyes in a daze, revealing a pair of turbid eyes. When he heard the voice, a pair of old hands as rough as bark immediately stretched out. After grabbing Xiaowu's hand, he immediately smiled and showed his few teeth. "It's Xiaowu. It's good that you are back." "It's good that you are back." Xiaowu grasped the old man's hand tightly. He looked at the clothes that his grandfather wore like a beggar. He didn't know how long he hadn't taken a bath. His whole body exuded an unpleasant smell. He was so weak that he couldn't speak loudly. It was obvious that he was too hungry and had no strength. Xiaowu's eyes emitted a cold light. 3 years ago, he was a healthy old man who was hale and hearty and dressed neatly. It was absolutely abnormal that he became like this today. Fang Mu glanced at Xiaowu and his 2 grandsons at the door and did not go in. He turned and walked into another room of the thatched hut. It should be the kitchen according to the geographical location. There was a pot in the kitchen, which had been used recently. Fang Mu opened it and saw the turbid soup floating in it. He immediately took the spoon and scooped it up to have a look. It was all wild vegetables. He doesn't even have food to eat. No wonder the old man is so weak. Fang Mu murmured. Although he was not a doctor, he had experienced the old man's weak state. He could see it at a glance. After thinking for a moment, he untied the water skin from his waist and took out an elixir. He turned and walked into the room. "Grandpa, tell me, did that woman, Huli, do you think she did it? I'm going to find her now." As soon as he entered the room, Fang Mu heard Xiaowu's words full of killing intent. "No, don't make trouble." The old man gasped and said intermittently. He was afraid that Xiaowu would do stupid things. He used all his strength to hold Xiaowu's hand and didn't let him go. but he was so anxious that he rolled his eyes and fainted completely. "Grandpa, what's wrong with you?" Xiaowu panicked immediately. He kept shaking his grandpa's body with tears flowing. "Grandpa, don't scare me." Feng Mu couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled Xiaowu away and shouted in a deep voice, "If you don't want to see your grandpa starve to death, get out of my way." Xiaowu stood up without saying anything and knelt down in front of Feng Mu. He said, "Your Honor, please save my grandpa's life. I'm willing to do anything." Feng Mu sat on the bedside and fed the old man the elixir. He tapped several acupoints on the old man's chest with his fingers to help open them. He said, "Don't worry. Your grandpa is fine. He just fainted because of hunger. I fed him a pill with a mild medicinal effect. It's enough to help him recover from his weakened state. If you have the time to kneel, why don't you go get some food from the carriage? This pill alone isn't enough to make him full." Xiao heard Feng Mu's words and immediately smiled. He wiped his tears and said, "Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going now." Datian knelt on the ground and kowtowed a few times. He didn't know how to express his gratitude. He could only tell Feng Mu with actions. Chapter 118. 10 minutes later, there was a smell of meat coming from the thatched cottage. The old village head held the steamed bun in his right hand and the broth in his left hand. While wolfing down the steamed bun, he raised his head and repeatedly confirmed with Xiaowu, "Xiaowu, are you sure you didn't steal them?" Xiaowu scratched his head and looked embarrassed. It seemed that there was nothing wrong with stealing. The bodyguard was not Lord Su Li's servant. He asked him to get the food. Xiaowu was so anxious that he didn't react and went to get it directly. The old village head stopped eating, put down the steamed bun, and said with a sullen face, "Really? How did I teach you? How can you steal?" Xiaowu lowered his head shamefully. Feng Mu immediately smiled and said, "Old village head, don't blame Xiaowu. I asked him to get it. I think Lord Su Li won't care about such a small thing." Lord Su Li? The old village head was confused. Then Xiaowu talked about his experience in the past 3 years and his current situation. The old village head burst into tears immediately. He touched the heads of Xiaowu and Datian with relief and sighed. "God bless you too to meet such a good person as Lord Su Li. By the way, I can recover so quickly thanks to the elixir of this little brother. Unfortunately, I have no money and I'm afraid that I can't afford it. Your unyielding character is admirable. Although the elixir is good, it is not as good as your life." Feng Mu looked sincere and smiled gently. "Besides, the elixir was given to me by my master. Naturally, I can control it. Even if my master knows it, she won't say anything. Don't worry, old mister. Little brother, you are really kind-hearted." Seeing Feng Mu and his grandfather talking happily, Xiaowu temporarily suppressed the anger in his heart. He thought that the bodyguard looked cold and hard to get along with, but in fact, he was surprisingly kind-hearted. It was really amazing. "Grandpa, it's almost dark. Go back with me," Xiaowu said, and was about to help the old village head up. The old village head was defeated and waved his hand repeatedly. "You go back. I won't go there, so as not to make trouble for Defu." "Grandpa, what are you saying?" Xiaowu frowned and said hurriedly, "Grandpa, you did nothing wrong. Why are you starving and suffering here? It is clear that Wang Li wants to drive you away. I won't let her get what she wants. Besides, don't you want to visit Lady Su Li? She is the benefactor of me and Datian. Maybe she will uphold justice for you." The old village head failed to persuade Xiaowu. Finally, he followed Xiaowu back to the small building. "Io, what's that smell? It's sour and stinky. I can smell it from afar." Wang Li covered her nose and ran out of the yard. When she saw Xiaowu and the other 3 people coming back, her face immediately became longer than a horse's face. Her sharp voice pierced the eardrum. "Little Wu, why did you carry him back? It's so smelly. Hurry up and get out. Don't dirty the courtyard." Xiaowu was angry and was about to step forward. But Feng Mu stood up first and said, "Madam Wang, it is my idea that the old village head comes back. It is also my master's idea. Do you have any objection?" Wang Li looked stagnant and said intermittently, "Even your miss can't meddle in other people's family affairs, can she? As she said, Wang Li had stepped aside and stopped blocking the door with her body. Xiaowu snorted and walked into the yard with the old village head on his back. Then he and Datian immediately started to wash the old village head and change his clothes. Feng Mu glanced at Wang Li, who stood aside with resentment. Then he went up to the second floor nervously. Before he reported, he heard a melodious voice like that of an oriole coming from the room. "Come in." Feng Mu's scalp was numb. He hesitated for a moment and opened the door obediently. When he saw Su Li sitting in a chair and reading a book with her back to him, he immediately walked a few steps lightly and stood behind Su Li. It was the first time for him to face Su Li alone. It was impossible to say that he was not nervous. Although they were of the same age, Su Li's image in his heart was heavier than that of his eldest brother, Feng Yuan. Su Li was like a god overlooking all living beings in the sky and couldn't be blasphemed. "You are quite self-assertive." Su Li turned around and smiled lightly. "I never said that I let the old village head come here." Feng Mu smiled embarrassedly and didn't know what to say. He was indeed a little self-assertive. "Besides, the elixir I gave you was used to consolidate your foundation and restore your cultivation. But you gave it to him?" Su Li's next words made Feng Mu's smile stiffen. He stuttered and explained, "I also saw that the old man was so weak that he was about to die. So I... Forget it. It seems that you don't understand the value of that elixir." Su Li lowered her head again and looked at the scroll in her hand. "For the sake of him being Xiaowu's grandfather, I won't argue with you. But the cost of refining the elixir will be borne by you. I will deduct it from your salary." Feng Mu gave a hollow laugh and said, "Can I ask how much is the elixir worth?" "It is your salary for 3 years. You can leave now," Su Li said lightly. Feng Mu looked aggrieved and almost cried out. But after thinking about it, he found that he ate, drank, and lived in the Leanly building. Even if he had no salary, it didn't affect him. But if he wanted to go out in the future, he had to ask his eldest brother for help. Mammy Li sent Feng Mu away. Looking at his listless appearance, she couldn't help but snigger. The miss really likes to tease these boys. I don't know which one is the type that the miss likes. Speaking of which, the miss is 16 years old. It's time to talk about marriage. Time flies. Speaking of which, the old miss has been gone for 16 years. Mammy Li stood by the door and looked at Su Li, who was reading quietly in the room. She sighed in her heart. If the little miss is still alive, she will be as old as Arya. In the bathroom, Xiaowu and Datian boiled 3 buckets of bath water for the old village head. They almost removed 3 layers of the old village head's dirty skin. The firewood piled in the room was reduced by half. Wang Li couldn't help but curse. "Old bastard, you waste so much firewood as soon as you come back. When a miss leaves, I won't let you off." Xiaowu didn't have time to pay attention to Wang Li. He happily helped his grandfather change into the clothes he brought from the Qinghe town and combed his grandfather's disheveled white hair. The old village head immediately seemed to be a different person from inside to outside. He became the old man of virtue and prestige 3 years ago instead of an old beggar in rags. Looking at his clothes, the old village head couldn't hide his joy and said, "Xiaowu, it's not impolite for me to see Ms. Su in this clothes, right?" "No, it's not." Xiaowu smiled brightly and said, "Ms. Su is very nice. It doesn't matter if you wear coarse clothes, as long as you are clean." "How can I do that?" The old village head pulled a long face and looked at himself in the mirror. "Anyway, Mr. Su is the benefactor of both of you. I have to be serious. Datian, come and help me to comb my beard. How can I see others with such a mess?" When the 3 of them were busy, a short and fat figure came to the door. It was Wang Dafu. Seeing that his father regained his spirit, Wang Dafu suddenly had extremely complicated emotions. All kinds of words piled up in his heart were stuck in his throat and finally turned into one word, Dad. When the old village head turned his head and saw Wang Dafu, his face immediately became gloomy. After a few seconds, he snorted and said, "Don't worry. Even if you give me this place, I won't live here. This time I just come to see Xiaowu's benefactor. I won't disturb you." Hearing that, Wang Dafu immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He nodded and said nothing. Then he turned around and left the room. Xiao was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. He shouted, "You don't even care about your father's life. Wang Dafu, are you still a human?" The old village head hurriedly pulled Xiao and sighed deeply. His wrinkled face looked tired and said, "Forget it. I'm also tired. I can't scold you anymore. Xiao, don't make trouble for Ms. Su. Just let it go." He would rather suffer losses than any misfortune in his son's family. This was also retribution. If he didn't have a bad vision and let his son marry Wang Li, he wouldn't end up like this today. Looking at the old village head, Xiao's heart ached. Finally, he could only listen to the old village head and no longer make trouble for Wang Dafu. Accompanied by Xiao, the old village head went upstairs. Mammy Li pushed the door open. When the old man, who was in his 60s, saw the young girl in a room, he was suddenly stunned. He looked around and blurted out, "Where is Ms. Su? Why is she not upstairs?" Xiao hurriedly whispered, "Grandpa, she is Ms. Su, the youngest special class lecturer of the Qinghe Girls' School." The old village head was completely stunned. Suli was just a young girl. How could she become the special class lecturer of the Qinghe Girls' School? "Grandpa," Xiao shouted twice, and the old village head immediately came to his senses. He tidied up his clothes and walked in. When he was about to kneel down, Suli stepped forward and held him. Her gentle voice like spring breeze flowed into the old village head's heart like a stream. "You are an elder, so I should be the one bowing to you. I can't accept kneeling to you." Suli's laughter immediately made the old village head relax. He shook his head and said, "In ancient times, the accomplished are the teachers. Ms. Su can become the special class lecturer of the school. You must have real ability in learning. I am just a Shiozai who failed the imperial examination. How can I be compared with Ms. Su? It is not inappropriate to worship her." "Old village head, you're really a talkative person." Suli personally poured tea and let the old village head sit down. She said, "May I know your name?" The old village head was flattered and took the tea. He hurriedly said, "I am Wang Yao. My ancestors have been in Dowang village for generations. When I was young, I went to the nearby town to take the local examination and became the village head. I'm not as knowledgeable as Xiao. I am really ashamed. Old village head, you are really modest. In fact, besides coming here to relax, I have another request. I hope you can help me." Suli said and signaled Mammy Li with her eyes. Mammy Li immediately took Xiao and Datian away. Seeing Suli being so cautious, the old village head couldn't help but feel nervous. He originally thought it was strange that a special class lecturer of the Qinghe Girls' School would come to such a poor and backward village. It turned out that she really had other purposes. After contemplating, the old village head looked serious and said slowly, "Ms. Su, you can say it directly. Xiao and Datian owe you a lot. As long as I can help, I will do my best to help you." Suli still smiled gently and said, "Old village head, don't be nervous. It is not a big deal. You have lived here for decades. You must be very familiar with the terrain. Do you know some beautiful and unfrequented places? I want to build a yard to enjoy the beautiful scenery. After all, I can't live in other people's homes every time I come here." "I see." The old village head suddenly understood and immediately said with a smile, "I have no other skills. But in terms of familiarity with the terrain of the nearby mountains and rivers, no one can compare with me within 100 miles. When I was young, I worked as a laborer in the medicine hall and went into the mountains to collect herbs every day. If you want to find a place, I will take you to see it tomorrow." Suli smiled slightly and shook her head. "It is not urgent. I have ordered others to buy the map of the nearby mountains and rivers. At that time, you only need to mark the suitable place, and someone will go to explore it. It will save a lot of time." "That's good." The old village head looked ashamed and said, "I can't stand the tossing and turning. Miss Su, you're so thoughtful. I also want to save time. Don't be ashamed, old village head." Suli comforted him and drank tea quietly without talking. The old village head also imitated her and took a sip of tea, but he felt strange in his heart. Chapter 119. Bang! Suddenly, there was a loud bang in the small courtyard. It seemed that the courtyard door was kicked open. Although the old village head had lived for a long time and had good self-restraint, this was his son's home. When he heard the sound, he couldn't sit still immediately. If you're curious, you can go downstairs and have a look. I am used to staying alone. You don't need to wait for the map here. After Suli reminded him, the old village head excused himself and hurried downstairs. When he went downstairs, the old village head saw the culprit who kicked open the courtyard door. He was slightly stunned. Standing at the door was a little boy who seemed to be about 10 years old. His clothes were tattered. He didn't know where he came back from fighting. The boy sniffed with his nose. Suddenly, he pulled a long face and howled, "Mom, the house is so stinky. Is it done by Dad?" Wang Li heard the sound and came out. When she saw the boy, she immediately exclaimed, "Oh, my baby son, Zhua. What happened to you? Your clothes are torn. Let me see if you are hurt." The boy's face shrank. He immediately swung his sleeves and hit Wang Li's face. The latter screamed in pain, "I'm fine. Let Dad out. He made the house so stinky. I'm going to get even with him." When the old village head saw his grandson, whom he hadn't seen for 3 years, became so sloppy, he trembled with anger. He couldn't help but step forward and slap the boy. Slap! Wang Li was instantly stunned. She looked at the old man who was bullied casually like an angry lion. She couldn't say a word for a while. "I don't care what I do, but look at what you taught Zhua. How can you face the ancestors of the Wang clan like this? Today, I will let Dafu divorce you." Wang Li was stunned for a moment and finally reacted. She screamed angrily. "Olbi Astra starred, how dare you hit me? Dafu, you bastard, come out. My life is so bitter. Even your dad dares to hit me. How dare you?" Wang Lijua also followed his mother to beat the old village head. He cursed, "Olbi Astra starred. Who asked you to hit my mother? Who asked you to hit my mother?" Wang Dafu came out in a panic and saw that his wife was fighting with his father. His son was also inside, so he immediately went up to stop them, who knew that he wouldn't be able to stop them. Soon, he became the target of Wang Li and her son's beating. Suli shook her head repeatedly and asked Feng Mu, Xiao Wu, and others to stop them. Although she didn't want to meddle in the affairs of the Wang family, the old village head was still useful. If his brain was damaged, it would be bad. Feng Mu had cultivation, so his strength was great. Soon, he separated the 4 people who were wrestling together. The old village head's lips trembled. He kept breathing heavily and stared at Wang Li fiercely. Wang Dafu sighed and covered his wound. Wang Lijua was inevitably injured by accident. He did not feel it when they were fighting, but after they separated, he felt pain all over his body and immediately cried. What a sin! The old village head wailed and went back to the house with the help of Xiao Wu to end the farce. At dinner time, Suli received the invitation of the Wang family to go downstairs for dinner. After she went downstairs, she saw the 3 members of the Wang family sitting at the table with bruised noses and swollen faces. A light flashed through her eyes. Then she walked over calmly and sat at the table. Wang Li immediately smiled politely and said, "Thank you for coming, Mississippi. These dishes are the specialties of our Dawang village. I don't know if they suit your taste." "Madam, you must be joking. I'm also from a poor family. There is nothing I can't get used to," Suli said and picked up the chopsticks. She picked up a piece of game and ate it slowly. Wang Li saw that Suli ate elegantly and thought that Suli was just joking. She didn't believe that poor families would teach their children table manners. Wang Lijua stared at Suli. The daughters of the villagers were exposed to the wind and sun all day long. Their skin was dark, and they didn't have any temperament. He had never seen such a beautiful elder sister like Suli. In his eyes, it seemed that Suli's every frown and smile were shining, just like the fairy daughter in the book. "I haven't introduced him to you, Mississippi. This is my son, Wang Lijua." Wang Li smiled and held Wang Lijua's hand. Although he is a little naughty, he is now a student of the school in the town. He has learned a lot of poems and songs. "Miss, maybe you can't win him in an argument." "Really? He is really a little genius." Suli's expression didn't change, and she said with a faint smile, Xiaowu and others who were standing by the door couldn't help but laugh. Wang Li really dared to say anything. At this moment, Wang Lijua suddenly stood up from his seat. He pointed at Su Li and said loudly to Wang Li, "Mother, I want to marry her." Puff! Wang Dafu, who was still drinking tea, was so shocked that he spat saliva on Wang Li's face. Wang Li stared blankly at Wang Lijua, who was only 10 years old. Even Fong Mu and others who were standing outside the door couldn't help but turn around and poke their heads out to look into the room. The whole room suddenly fell into a strange silence. Wang Lijua looked at his mother's face full of saliva with disgust and said unsatisfactorily, "Why don't you speak?" "Mother, didn't you say that even the stars in the sky will be picked for me? You also said that the women I like are all their honor. I like her. Let her marry me, okay?" The cold sweat on Wang Li's face instantly came down. She quickly covered Wang Lijua's mouth and said with an apologetic smile, "I'm sorry to frighten you. Joy is still young, and a child's words carry no harm. Please don't blame me." Su Li slowly took the bowl and took a sip of the soup. She was still smiling, but it made Wang Li couldn't help but feel cold. Was this the momentum of a miss from a big family? It was so terrible. "I don't blame you." Su Li put down the bowl and said indifferently, "But today, Su Li has seen the world. It seems that your child's education needs to be improved. Yes, yes, yes. Miss Su is right." Wang Dafu held down Wang Lijua, who was constantly struggling. He immediately stood up and bowed to Su Li fiercely. "My family is unfortunate. I will discipline my son well in the future. I'm really sorry." Su Li took the towel handed by Mammy Li and wiped her mouth. "Enjoy your meal." "Excuse me." Then, before the couple of Wang family asked her to stay, she turned around and walked up the stairs, as if Su Li was the master here, not Wang Dafu's home. As Xiaowu and others left with Su Li, there were only 3 members of the Wang family in the central room. Wang Dafu's chest violently rose and fell. He had never wanted to strangle his son more than now. He even dared to flirt with a miss from a big family from the Qinghe town. "You taught a good son." Wang Dafu pounded the table fiercely and finally took out some of the spirit that a man should have. "Now, don't talk about money. If the Su family investigates, what should we do?" "Wang Dafu." Wang Li let go of her hand that covered her son's mouth and pointed at Wang Dafu's swollen eyes. She scolded again. "You bastard. Since that old bastard came back, you have become more daring. You scold me again? I'll beat you to death." When Wang Lijua saw his parents start fighting again, he felt that he was being completely ignored. Immediately, anger rose in his heart. He picked up the stool and smacked the back of the couple, causing them to stagger and fall on the table full of food. "Ouch! My waist!" Wang Li climbed up from the table. Her body was covered with all kinds of soup, vegetables, and leaves. She turned around and saw her son, who was still holding the stool, angrily. She was so angry that her heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys tangled together. Her eyes were red. She pulled Wang Lijua's trousers and slapped him fiercely. "You bastard! You even beat your mother. How did your mother spoil you? You ungrateful wolf! Don't you remember?" "Wow!" Wang Lijua was beaten and cried loudly. Wang Dafu climbed up embarrassedly. Seeing this scene, his mind was in a mess, and a feeling of extreme exhaustion came to his heart. If it weren't for the salary of the village head, he really didn't want to stay at home for a moment. Mammy Li listened to the noise downstairs. She was so upset that she couldn't sleep. She couldn't help but get up and said to Su Li, who was sitting in meditation on the bed, "Miss, the Wang family is too messy. Let's move to the inn in the town." Su Li opened her eyes calmly and said, "It's desolate here. There may not be an inn. Let's wait for Fong Yuan and others to come back." Mammy Li nodded. Yes, she didn't know where Master Fong Yuan and others were sent by the miss. Why hadn't they come back yet? After midnight, the Wang family finally felt tired. There was no sound on the first floor. It was a silent night. The next morning, before Wang Dafu got up, a villager knocked on the door. He opened the door and saw that the person who came was the village's most nosy big mouth. He suddenly felt strange. Why did this woman come to his house? "Village head." The village woman was happy and said, Someone from our Dawang village comes again. What? Wang Dafu was stunned. Just serving Miss Su was enough to make him tremble with fear. And now there was another one. It's not what you think. The village woman waved her hand and said, It's not a miss who comes to play. It's a group of people from the broker house who want to buy children. Wang Dafu suddenly understood and then said with a strange face, Then why do you come to my house? He only had one son, Wang Lijua. Although his son was a bastard, he couldn't sell Wang Lijua. Hey, it's different this time. I'm kind enough to remind you. The village woman said unhappily. This time the boss of the broker house is very extraordinary. The children sold to the broker house before are worth a bag of food at most. This time they want to collect good seedlings. If you want to sell them, but you can't pass the test, they won't necessarily accept you. Really? Wang Dafu was surprised and said, Now even the broker house is so particular about buying children. I think the broker house has an extraordinary background. It's definitely not a swindler. They are now setting up a stall at the entrance of the village. They also said that even if they don't sell them, they can get money if they send their children to do the test. It's such a good thing. How can I not inform you? Wang Dafu was immediately moved by the village woman's words. It would be a waste if he didn't take advantage of it. Besides, Wang Lijua was beaten by her mother yesterday, and he didn't go to school today. It was better to send him to have a test. The village woman left after informing them. She took the money from the broker house. The more she informed, the more she would get. Naturally, she had to work harder. Although Wang Dafu had decided to send Wang Lijua, he still discussed with Wang Li. Good thing. Send Jua there quickly. Wang Li's eyes brightened when she heard that she could get money. If she didn't go, she wouldn't be Wang Li. After the discussion, they immediately carried Wang Lijua, who was still sleeping, to the entrance of the village. Just after the Wang family left, Fang Yuan and the other two finally rushed back to the Dawang village. They passed by the entrance of the village and saw a group of people. They didn't look at them and went directly to Su Li's residence. According to your request, I bought all the versions of the maps in the nearby towns. On the second floor, Su Li and the old village head sat opposite each other. Fang Yuan stood in front of them and spread out brand new maps. Some of them were made of silk cloth, and some were made of rice paper. Just by looking at the materials, it could be known that the maps were expensive. The old village head's eyelids were trembling. How much money would it cost? It seemed that Su Li was really a rich girl. She really wanted to build a yard in the nearby mountain. Hey, what map is this? Chapter 120. The old village head's hands trembled slightly. These kids, who seemed to be in their 20s, could grab things from the hands of the bandits. Didn't it mean that the servants around Su Li were more horrible than the bandits? Thinking that his son was still thinking about how to make a lot of money from Su Li, the old village head couldn't help but feel numb. Old village head? The old village head was shocked. He looked up and saw the gentle smile on Su Li's face. He immediately came to his senses and continued to find a suitable place for Su Li. After 2 hours, the old village head wiped his dry eyes. He hesitated for a moment and crossed out the last place that made him feel uneasy. He couldn't help but remind Su Li, I remember that I went to this place more than 40 years ago. After I went in, I couldn't tell the directions and couldn't find the way out. I almost starved to death. Finally, I don't know how I got out and survived. I still have a lingering fear when I think about it. Mr. Su, if it's not necessary, you'd better give up the last place. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she nodded with a smile. Don't worry, old village head. I know what I'm doing. These taels of silver are enough for you to buy a house in the nearby town and hire servants. Then you can spend the rest of your life in peace. The old village head took the brocade pouch handed by Su Li in a daze. It was light. When he opened it, he found that there were not taels of silver in it, but 5 notes of 100 taels of silver. 500 taels. Su Li gave him 500 taels of silver just by sitting here and crossing out a few places. He only earned 100 taels of silver in his whole life. Ignoring the old village head who was sitting at the table in a daze, Su Li asked Mammy, Li, and Xiaowu to stay. Then she packed up with Fong Yuan and the others and went out immediately. Mammy Li, how many days will Mr. Su and the others go? Xiao couldn't help but ask when he saw Su Li and the others go further and further. He didn't know what Su Li did, and he didn't dare to ask. As a servant, he still had the awareness. I don't know. Mammy Li shook her head and said with a smile, if you have time to think about it, you'd better help your grandfather to buy a house. Otherwise, when your uncle and aunt come back, the money given by the miss may not be left to your grandfather. I'll go now. Xiao suddenly woke up and immediately rushed into the room. After leaving the Dawang village, Fong Yuan and others removed their disguises. It was not very comfortable to have something covering their faces. Where are we going first? Fong Yuan handed over the map. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she directly turned over the last map. Go here. If there's a suitable place along the way, there's no harm in taking a look. Fong Yuan thought it was true. He could see from a change of expression that Su Li was very interested in the last dangerous place mentioned by the old village head. Hiya, hiya, hiya. 5 fine horses that could travel 1,000 miles a day set off, stirring up a cloud of dust along the way. In Shuedong stared at the slender figure on the horse in the front. She said, if the secret base is built, the Linli building will have a place to train talents. Su Li, do you really want to establish a force comparable to the royal family of Nanjiang country to compete with it? But if that's the case, wouldn't it take too long? She, In Shuedong, was once a high-ranking member of her family who was in charge of a force. She naturally knew that cultivating a profound force required not only financial resources, but also time. In Shuedong kept all kinds of doubts in her heart and did not ask any more questions, because she knew that even if she asked, she might not get the answer. More importantly, they had no other way to go except the road given by Su Li. 2 days later, Su Li and others finally came to the towering mountain mentioned by the old village head. The mountain road was too steep, so they could only tie the horses to the trees at the foot of the mountain and walk up the mountain. Fortunately, all 5 of them had cultivation. Even so, their speed did not decrease. But they didn't know if there was something wrong with the location given by the old village head. They searched the whole mountain all night, but they did not find any place that matched the description of the old village head. It's so strange. Did the old man remember it wrong? Chu Qingning was so depressed that he had a toothache. He wandered in the woods all night and felt dizzy. Why don't we change the place? After all, 40 years have passed, and the terrain may have changed. It is possible that the place mentioned by the old village head no longer exists. In Shuedong couldn't help but suggest. Fong Yuan looked at Su Li and saw that she was staring at the map in a daze. Chu Qingning was about to disturb her, but Fong Yuan waved his hand to stop him. Chu Qingning pursed his lips and sat next to In Shuedong. They whispered while waiting for Su Li's decision. Fong Yuan crossed his arms and leaned against the tree for a rest. From time to time, he glanced at Su Li, who was thinking and rowing on the ground. Another day and night passed. Chu Qingning and In Shuedong couldn't whisper, so they found some hay from the woods and spread it on the ground to sleep. Fong Mu also wanted to rub the hay, but In Shuedong didn't like it. So he found a tree branch and lay down. Fong Yuan also felt tired, but Su Li still sat in the same place. There were many incomprehensible patterns on the ground, like arithmetic and sacrificial incantations that only a few members of the Wu clan knew. What the hell are you doing? Fong Yuan thought. Finally, he closed his eyes and leaned on the branch to have a rest. He didn't reach the inborn realm, so he was still weaker than Su Li. Not long after he fell asleep, he finally heard a familiar whisper. I haven't used it for a long time, so I can't remember a lot of things. It took me a whole day and a night. If he knows it, he will definitely scold me again. Fong Yuan suddenly opened his eyes and happened to see Su Li's comfortable and brilliant smile. It seemed that the light in front of him was brighter, which made his mind unconsciously ripple. But then he noticed that the smile seemed to be mixed with a touch of memory and missing. Who was he? Fong Yuan's heart sank. He began to doubt whether there was one more enemy besides Ling Li. Feng Yuan, wake them up. Let's go. Su Li's order made Feng Yuan come to his sense. He immediately pretended to be indifferent. He picked up the sheath on the side, walked to Chu Qingning, and poked his face hard. Chu Qingning woke up in a daze. When he opened his eyes, he saw Feng Yuan, who was as expressionless as a coffin board. He thought it was bad luck, and woke up In Xuedong, who was still sleeping. As for Feng Yuan directly cut off the branch behind him. With the sound of free fall, Feng Mu fell and screamed. He woke up completely. Tut tut, you deserve to be my brother. Chu Qingning smiled and said, fortunately, both Xuedong and I slept on the ground. Otherwise, it would be really uncomfortable to fall like this. Feng Mu looked at Feng Yuan with grievance. Seeing that his elder brother was gloomy and in a bad mood, he didn't dare to say a word. The 5 people went on the road again. Su Li didn't stop. She went straight to the mountainside. It only took a quarter of an hour to reach the destination. It was a bare stone platform with nothing. We have passed here several times, haven't we? Chu Qingning squatted down and touched the new grass under his feet with his fingers. Then he looked at the bare mountain wall with a strange look and said, there is nothing here. It doesn't look like there is a valley in the terrain. Su Li stood in front of the mountain wall and deduced. Then she took a deep breath and used the strength of her palm to hit the mountain wall. Boom! A deafening roar resounded in everyone's ears. Feng Yuan thought that Su Li would hit a lot of mountain stones, but he saw that the ladder was blasted out at a faster speed and was shaken off the cliff in the blink of an eye. Su Li, Chu Qingning, and others exclaimed in horror. The sudden change was unexpected, and there was no time for them to help. Feng Yuan's pupils shrank. He rushed to the edge of the mountain and was about to jump down. However, Su Li had already come up from the cliff and gently held Feng Yuan's hand to stop his forward momentum. She said, it's okay for me to go down, but it's not necessarily for you. Don't do stupid things. Feeling the softness from his fingertips, Feng Yuan's face turned red. After hearing the latter's words, he stopped breathing and his whole body was full of vigor. He must break through the inborn realm as soon as possible. Su Li, are you okay? Seeing Su Li coming, In Xuedong couldn't help but ask with concern. Su Li shook her head slightly and continued to calculate against the mountain wall. Chu Qingning tooted and said, this is the inborn realm. After the purification, her body is as light as a feather. She doesn't get hurt even if she falls down. If we go down, most of us will die a living young master. In Xuedong looked at Su Li's back with admiration in her beautiful eyes. Boom! Su Li slammed on the mountain wall again, and the sound made everyone's head hurt. Su Li was shaken far away again. But this time, she controlled the strength and was not shaken off the cliff. Feng Yuan didn't look at Su Li anymore. He directly sat down with his legs crossed and took out the AO sword skills to read. The other 3 people didn't have Feng Yuan's tenacious belief. They couldn't understand the swordsmanship book in the continuous roars. They could only stay a little farther away, practice in 3 different places, and watch the surroundings. Although few people in the martial arts circle came to the Dahan country, it was better to be careful. Su Li constantly bombarded the mountain wall for the whole day. Feng Yuan gradually saw the pattern. Every time, Su Li adjusted the angle and strength. It seemed that she was looking for something. And every time, the counterforce from the mountain wall became smaller and smaller in the process of Su Li's constant adjustment. The moonlight shone through the dense leaves. Su Li looked tired, but she was very excited. She had already determined where it was, and just now, she had found the weakest point. Without hesitation, she pressed her right palm on the mountain wall. Her palm spat out. Finally, the mountain wall didn't make a deafening sound. Instead, it broke like a piece of thin paper with a pop sound. Immediately, the scene in front of him shook a few times like water ripples, and the scene in front of him was completely different. Feng Yuan was rarely shocked. He slowly stood up and looked at the new world that suddenly appeared. He was speechless. Tactical Matrix. Chapter 121. Chu Qingning and the other 2 heard the noise and came. When they saw the scene in front of them, they couldn't help but take a deep breath. There is a cave here. If Suli didn't insist on staying here and blasting the mountain wall, they couldn't believe that the belly under the hard mountain rock was empty. Casually making 2 torches, the group slowly entered the tunnel. This mountain road is rugged and uneven. Is it formed naturally? Chu Qingning leaned against the wall and looked carefully. He couldn't help but ask. Indeed, Suli was surprised and said, not only the cave, but also the tactical matrix in front of the cave is formed naturally. It only has the ability to trap people, but not to kill. Old village head, you're lucky to come out from inside. Chu Qingning suddenly understood. In Xuedong's eyes were full of splendor. The tactical matrix was a profound skill that could only be touched by the real martial arts circle. The Yin family, the Fong family, and the Chu family existed in Nanjiang country. They could only be regarded as half of the martial arts circle at most. Now she was more and more suspicious that Suli was not a child of the Su family in the Desa town. She probably had another origin. The mountain road was not complicated, and it became narrower and narrower. At the end, there was only a space of 10 square meters, but Suli was very satisfied. With the development of this place and the natural tactical matrix at the entrance, there was no more suitable training base into Han country. She came here just for a beginning. If there was no suitable place near Dawang village, she would find another remote place for the base. But she didn't expect that the old village head gave her a big surprise. In this way, we can select the suitable seedlings to train. But In Xuedong hesitated and asked, how to develop this place? If we let the craftsmen come here, it will be exposed in vain. If we kill them, it doesn't matter. I have my own way. Suli didn't say it clearly, but a faint light flashed in her eyes. After another 3 days, Chu Qingning and others were impatient. Suli finally took out a wooden token engraved with a strange mark. With this wooden token, you can freely enter it. You don't need to work as hard as last time. Is there really such a magical thing? Chu Qingning took the wooden token and looked at the entrance of the cave, which had been restored to the mountain wall. In the past 3 days, the natural tactical matrix had restored itself and returned to its original appearance. Since you're so interested, I'll let you try. Suli handed the wooden token to Chu Qingning. Chu Qingning looked bitter. When he looked back, he saw that In Xuedong and others were watching the show with great interest. He could only shake his head helplessly and walk towards the mountain wall. It seemed that he was going to hit the wall on purpose. Just when In Xuedong and others thought that Chu Qingning was going to hit the hard stone wall, the wooden token suddenly emitted a faint shimmer. The whole stone wall rippled like the surface of a lake. Then Chu Qingning seemed to be integrated into the stone wall and went in without any hindrance. There's actually such a magical thing in the world. Chu Qingning excitedly shuttled back and forth. After In Xuedong and others played with them for a few times, they went back home. Now that they had found the address, they didn't have to waste any more time in Dawang village. It was 6 days after they returned to Dawang village. When Su Li and others returned on horseback, they found that the whole village was filled with a faint desolation. Did something happen? Fang Yuan and others looked serious. This atmosphere was not like a normal fishing village by the sea. They immediately rushed to Wang Dafu's house. They saw that half of the courtyard wall outside the small building collapsed. There were 2 white lanterns hanging on the small door. Obviously, someone died. Suli raised her eyebrows and walked in, but she didn't see any mourning hall. There was only a straw mat on the ground, and a corpse was wrapped in it. Fang Yuan immediately stepped forward and uncovered the straw mat. When he saw that the person lying on the straw mat was not Mammy Li, he was slightly relieved. Then he pursed his lips and turned back to whisper, "It's the old village head. He was killed with 1 blow. He was at least a warrior in the acquired 3rd hurdle." When everyone heard that, except for Su Li, who was expressionless, their expressions changed. Especially Fang Mu, who had the most contact with the old village head. His eyes were burning with anger. "Woo, woo, 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 my poor child." There was a faint cry in the room. Su Li stepped forward and pushed the door open. Suddenly, she saw Wang Dafu, his wife, and Mammy Li. Wang Li was not as rude as before. She seemed to have lost her soul. Her tears kept flowing, and she was murmuring. Wang Dafu's state was not much better. He didn't know how many days he had not changed his clothes. The bloodstains on his clothes had turned brown. "Miss, you are finally back." Mammy Lee looked up and saw Su Li and others. She was overjoyed and quickly grabbed Su Li's hand. She said, "Something bad happened, miss. Since you left, a group of people came and took away the grandson of the Wang family on the third night. Xiaowu and others tried to stop them, but they were also caught. The old village head was killed with one blow. The children of many families in the village have disappeared. What a sin. Who are the people? Do you have any clues?" Su Li frowned. It had been 3 days since Mammy Lee said that. She couldn't have a clue. It must be them. Before Mammy Lee said anything, Wang Li suddenly came back to her senses. She was excited and knelt in front of Su Li. She pulled Su Li's trousers and begged, "Miss Su, please save my son." 6 days ago, Wang Li told Su Li what happened in the past few days. It turned out that 6 days ago, the day Su Li and others left, a group of people dressed in rich clothes came to the village. They said they came to buy children. Even if they didn't sell the children, they could get a lot of money. At this time, it was the spring closed fishing season, and the village had no income. Hearing such a good news, all the families in the village immediately sent their children to the hospital. Wang Li was no exception. She still remembered that after the children were sent to the hospital, the middleman also praised Wang Lijua. She was rewarded with 10 taels of silver. She was very happy at that time. For 3 days, the middleman stayed here and didn't leave. They checked all the children in the village. Many families couldn't afford it, so they took this time to sell their children for a good price. When the whole village was in a jubilant mood, something big happened on the third night. Most of the children in the village were stolen secretly. Only Wang Dafu's family noticed it. At that time, the old village head just got up at night. When he saw a group of black shadows holding Wang Lijua, he immediately shouted and rushed to them with a shovel. Unexpectedly, he was killed in one move. When Xiaowu and Datian came out and saw it, they immediately rushed to them like crazy, but they were no match for the black shadows. Soon, they were controlled by the black shadows and taken away. Wang Dafu and his wife heard the sound and came out. When they saw such a tragic scene, they didn't dare to go out. After the black shadows left, Wang Dafu helped his father up with trembling hands. His face was full of tears. Since her son was caught, Mrs. Wang didn't have the mood to decorate the mourning hall. Only Wang Dafu still had a little conscience. He hung 2 white lanterns at the door. Mammy Lee said in a low voice. She had seen the whole thing clearly. She naturally added some words that Wang Li was ashamed to say to Su Li. Abducting a boy and a girl? And they even looked at the root bone. Su Li was lost in thought, but she couldn't help but frown slightly. Of course, she knew that the group of people coming was definitely not a broker house. But there were too many sects and forces that could do such a thing just based on this clue. How could she know which one it was? Fan Yuan also looked gloomy. Even Su Li felt it was tricky. They were even more confused and at a loss. "Miss Su." Fang Mu stood up. After the anger, he became calm. He still remembered his current identity and didn't call her too casually. Su Li raised her head, and there was an inquiry in her eyes. Fang Mu avoided the sight of the Wang couple. He gritted his teeth and took out a butterfly-like stone from his arms. He whispered, "This should be helpful." When Fang Yuan saw what Fang Mu took out, his expression changed dramatically. He stepped forward and grabbed Fang Mu's collar. There was a killing intent in his eyes. He said, "Why do you have this thing?" Fang Yuan looked bitter, but he didn't mean to defend himself. Su Li raised her eyebrows and asked Xu Qingning to send the Wang couple back to the room. Then she stepped forward and took the butterfly-like stone. She said softly, "The poisonous insect tracing is a 3rd-grade odor insect. It is very precious. It is probably the natal poisonous insect of the head of the Fang family." "Fang Yuan, am I right?" Fang Yuan didn't answer Su Li. He still stared at Fang Mu with a pair of cold eyes. He asked word by word, "How is my father?" "Eldest brother, just kill me." Fang Mu closed his eyes painfully. He had long known that if he took it out, it would inevitably make Fong Yuan furious. If he didn't want to avenge the old village head and save Xiaowu and others, he would keep this secret forever. He couldn't bear the pain of losing his eldest brother. Fong Yuan, don't be impatient. Su Li patted the latter's tight shoulder and said, "It is impossible to get the natal poisonous insect of the poisonous insect clan by force. Moreover, the poisonous insect is in the state of resting and intact. It is impossible for Fong Mu to forcibly take it from your father. If you have time to be angry, you might as well ask your brother how your father died." Fong Yuan's body trembled slightly. He was silent for a long time and finally let Fong Mu go. As the young patriarch, he certainly knew the characteristics of the natal poisonous insect above the 3rd grade. Since the natal poisonous insect was taken out, it naturally meant that his biological father had died. As a collateral relative, Fong Mu was not qualified to know the secrets of the 3rd grade natal poisonous insect. After hearing Su Li's words, he suddenly felt guilty. He knelt down and bowed his head, saying, "I'm sorry, eldest brother. I am afraid of being misunderstood by you. If I had known this, I would have given the poisonous insect to you as soon as possible. I am wrong." Fong Yuan raised his head so that people couldn't see his face clearly. His slightly trembling voice came out, "My father, how did he die?" Fong Mu's eyes showed hatred when he heard the words. He said, "Mo Yutian, the general of the royal family of Nanjiang country. If he hadn't plotted against the head of the Fong family, our Fong family wouldn't have been reduced to this. I used the secret skill to escape at that time. Later, I was deliberately caught by the Dahan country and became a prisoner of war. I met the head of the family. If he hadn't used his last strength to prolong my life for me, I wouldn't have been able to see you." Fong Mu was about to tell Fong Yuan all kinds of secrets that happened in that year, but he was interrupted by Su Li. Okay. Even if you tell these things, what can you do?" Fong Mu's tone was stagnant, and he suddenly felt bitter. "That's right. Even if they did, would they be able to take revenge now?" Yin Xuedong and Chu Qingming's eyes darkened, and they both fell into silence. "Clap, clap." Su Li clapped her hands and handed the poisonous insect of Miles' tracing to Fong Mu. She said, "Let's take care of the things in front of us first. We will naturally take revenge in the future. Fong Yuan, you wake it up, and it can be regarded as the inheritance of your Fong family. Hurry up." Fong Yuan took over the poisonous insect. Without saying anything, he held the sword and cut a small wound on his chest near his heart. Then his lips slightly wriggled. The butterfly poisonous insect actually came to life, and then it lay on Fong Yuan's chest and sucked the blood. Just in the blink of an eye, Fong Yuan felt that most of the pneuma and blood in his body were gone, and he almost fell down. At this moment, a white and slender palm was printed on his back. In an instant, his internal organs were wrapped by warm green light, and his hematopoietic ability increased rapidly, which actually caught up with the loss of the poisonous insect sucking blood. After a full hour, the gray and stone-like poisonous insect returned to the colorful butterfly. It spread its wings and gently fell on Fong Yuan's shoulder. The movement was intimate. Chapter 122. Turning around, Fong Yuan, whose face was still a little pale, looked at Su Li with some gratitude in his eyes. But Su Li said slowly with a faint smile, "The 3rd grade poisonous insect only absorbed 5 times the blood essence in your body. I thought it absorbed 10 times. After all, without the help of auxiliary medicine, only the inborn realm can directly refine the 3rd grade poisonous insect. It seems that your father had dealt with it before taking it out. With the blood relationship between you and your father, he relieved half of the burden for you." Fong Yuan looked gloomy, but Su Li looked at Fong Mu and said, "But if you didn't refine the poisonous insect, this poisonous tracing insect would explode like fireworks in other people's bodies. It would make people die without leaving any bones." Seeing Su Li make an explosive action, Fong Mu felt numb. Fortunately, he didn't try to refine the poisonous insect. Otherwise, hearing this, Fong Yuan's eyes were filled with tenderness. At the same time, he also felt guilty in his heart. He shouldn't have done that to Fong Mu just now. Fong Mu scratched his head and smirked. Before he said anything, he was directly interrupted by Su Li. Well, Fong Yuan, the poisonous tracing insect has been activated for you. Now find out where Xiaowu and others are. Okay. Fong Yuan looked serious. He took out the unwashed clothes of Xiaowu and Datian from the room and put them in front of the butterfly. The butterfly gently touched the clothes twice and immediately flew away. Su Li and others instantly followed it and went away. Mammy Li stayed in the room and watched this scene. She couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The people around the mist really had endless means. She watched the mist grow up from an early age, but she still didn't understand why the mist suddenly had so many strange skills. However, Su Li and others followed the poisonous tracing insect all the way to the north. The further they went, the more desolate it was. Finally, they stopped in front of a yard in the mountain. The yard was surrounded by mountains on all sides. There was only one entrance, and it was heavily guarded. The nearby mountains were rugged, which was easy to defend and difficult to attack. It seems that this is the secret of a certain force. Chu Qingning couldn't help but say. He looked back and saw Fong Yuan put the poisonous insect back into the wound on his chest and formed a butterfly mark. He couldn't help but smile. Fong Yuan, your mark is beautiful, but it is too unmanly. Look at me, Chu Qingning said, revealing the round, stone-like mark on his heart, which was dark and heavy. You still have time to talk about this at a time like this. Yin Xuedong was so angry that she pinched Chu Qingning's abdomen and scolded him in a low voice. Chu Qingning immediately shrank his neck and became serious. Fong Yuan didn't have time to pay attention to Chu Qingning. He walked to Su Li and looked at the entrance, which was constantly patrolled by red-robed men. He asked, "How is it? Should we force our way in or sneak in?" Su Li shook her head slightly. She took out a small white bottle and handed it to Fong Yuan, one for each person. There are many traps here. It would not be easy to force his way in. However, based on the way they walk and the techniques they use, I can tell which force they belong to. You can even tell that? Chu Qingning couldn't help but be surprised. He could see the practice method from a group of small guards. How profound was his knowledge of Xingong? It was difficult for him to even see through the techniques of his own clan. Su Li glanced at Chu Qingning and continued. It's the blood refining hall. Blood refining hall? Yin Xuedong frowned slightly. It sounds familiar. I seem to have heard of it somewhere. It turns out to be them. Chu Qingning suddenly understood and said, it's a frequent killer organization in Han country, Nanjiang country, and Zhushou country, and it's famous. It's second only to the mysterious Shalu cult. Hearing the two words Shalu cult, the figure of Ling Mo flashed in Su Li's mind. Recently, she didn't hear any rumors about the Yinma cult. Presumably, they should be living well in Yunjing. Thinking of that night when she killed 2 inborn elders of the blood refining hall in the wilderness, Su Li's eyes flashed with coldness. The blood refining hall was really haunting her and repeatedly fought against her. Take the elixir in the bottle, Su Li ordered. Fong Yuan and others took the elixir without saying anything. Then Su Li took a black burning incense and floated to the air vent to light it. The colorless and odorless smoke slowly blew into the yard along with the wind. Fong Yuan and others were speechless when they saw it. They had thought that there would be a tough battle, but Su Li unexpectedly poisoned them. Su Li came down from the air vent empty-handed. She squinted her eyes and said with a smile, the blood refining hall has countless yards to train killers secretly. Each yard has at least 3 inborn elders. Even if I can defeat them, I may not be able to kill them. It's easier to poison them, isn't it? Fong Yuan's face trembled. Chu Qingning and others were even more embarrassed. They all felt cold in their hearts. They used to be in a decent sect, so it took time for them to get used to Su Li's way of doing things. Plop, plop, plop. However, after 10 minutes, Chu Qingning and others saw the guard at the entrance fell down one by one. Su Li immediately ordered them to cover their faces and went in. She also put on a black cloak. Her figure turned into a flickering light and went into the dense building complex of the yard. In the silence, Chu Qingning and others immediately looked for the whereabouts of Xiaowu and others separately. Su Li's expression under the veil was very calm. She didn't look for Xiaowu, but jumped to the 3 luxurious courtyards in the deepest part of the yard. She dragged out 2 men and a woman and put them on the ground. They were all dressed in red elder costumes of the blood refining hall. Then she raised her hand and the sword fell. 3 inborn seniors were beheaded in their sleep and died very peacefully. Su Li wiped the blood on the sword expressionlessly. The blood refining hall would become the obstacle of the Shalu cult and the Linli building in the future. Now that she encountered it, she naturally needed to get rid of future troubles as soon as possible. The black incense she took out was the strongest poison that could be made now. If the cultivation of the inborn seniors was not higher than the 3rd hurdle, they would sleep for a quarter of an hour. If the cultivation of the inborn seniors was higher than the 3rd hurdle, the incense would be ineffective. It seems that this yard is not an important place of the blood refining hall. Otherwise, only 3 elders who were lower than the 3rd hurdle would be sent to guard it. Su Li thought so. After destroying the corpses, she left the courtyard and turned to find Feng Yuan and others. Su Li, come here quickly. Soon after walking out of the courtyard, Su Li heard Chu Qingning's exclamation from the west. She rushed to a house with a strong smell of blood and immediately frowned. At this time, Chu Qingning came out from inside with an extremely ugly face. In Xuedong also came out with a pale face. After walking a few steps, he vomited on the side. I found Xiaowu and the others in the east courtyard. The children of the Dawang village are all unconscious. Feng Yuan arrived from the east. When he saw Chu Qingning's expression, he was slightly shocked and immediately followed Su Li into the house silently. The light in the house was extremely dim. The pungent smell of blood came to Feng Yuan's face. Suddenly, he felt that he kicked something soft under his feet. He looked down. It was a bloody arm. It was very fresh, and the port was still gurgling with blood. Feng Yuan's pupils shrank violently. Then he noticed that the foot was sticky. It was the stickiness caused by the half-dried blood. Taking a deep breath, Feng Yuan tried his best to see the scene in the house. Even though he had been trained on the battlefield, he couldn't help but be shocked. It was not an exaggeration to call it hell. In the spacious house, there were all kinds of instruments of torture. Those instruments of torture were dyed black by blood. Some barbs were even stained with blood and flesh. A teenager, who seemed to be about the same age as them, was tied to the torture frame. His limbs had completely disappeared and scattered on the ground. Feng Yuan looked back at the broken arm at the door. It was the teenagers. What's wrong? Why do you have to cut off his limbs? Become a human stick. Feng Mu's eyes were red. He gasped and looked around. Then he saw that there were a lot of wooden barrels with a height of half a person on the 4 walls. Heads were exposed from the barrels, emitting a faint breathing sound. Obviously, they were still alive. All of them are human sticks. Feng Mu was so scared that he stepped back a few steps. He accidentally stepped on something. Crack! He looked back and saw that there were broken limbs piled up in the corner. Some of them had turned into bones. The blood refining hall is simply insane. Chu Qingning hammered the wall fiercely. Then he grabbed the man of the blood refining hall who fainted on the ground and still held the instruments of torture in his hands. He cut off his neck with a knife. The blood sprayed on the ground. Su Li just looked at him indifferently. She didn't even show any resentment. Ah! Chu Qingning let out a repressed roar. Even if he killed the man, he didn't feel happy at all. Su Li had said before that there were countless such places in the blood refining hall. At this time, Su Li's indifferent voice came. Chu Qingning, kill them all. Chu Qingning looked up in amazement. He saw that Su Li pointed at the group of teenagers with sticks. He was shocked in his heart and couldn't believe it. Su Li sneered. Do you think they still want to live after being like this? Let them die without knowing anything. That's what you should do now. Chu Qingning clenched his fists and felt pain. His face was livid. Looking at dozens of barrels on the wall, his eyes actually shed tears. Then he groaned and picked up the long knife to cut them. Puff! Puff! One head after another was thrown down. Soon Feng Mu joined in. The smell of blood in the room was heavier. In Shuedong held the door and choked with sobs. Fang Yuan sighed deeply and looked at Su Li, who was expressionless all the time. She should be angry, right? Or was she really calm? In fact, if I don't give them the antidote, after 6 hours, there will be no one alive in this yard. Su Li's voice suddenly sounded, which made Fang Yuan's heart tremble. He turned his head with his eyes full of disbelief. Then why did you let them? It may be a baptism for them. Su Li's eyes fell on Fang Yuan, and she smiled deeply. You are much calmer than them. You should have seen such a scene in the Fang family. No. Fang Yuan was immediately stimulated and said angrily, the Fang family can't do such a terrible thing. It's the military camp of Nanjiang. I see. Su Li showed a look of understanding, but she didn't say it all. In the military camp, people with sticks are mostly used to vent anger and train courage. It seems that you have a little status in the military camp. No, Fang Yuan said in a low tone and pointed to the barrel. I almost became like this, so I ran away. Su Li was slightly stunned and then nodded gently. She looked at Chu Qingning and Fang Mu, who seemed to be crazy, and said nothing. An hour later, Chu Qingning and Fang Mu were pale and covered with blood. As soon as they walked out of the house, they felt weak and collapsed on the ground. Su Li shook her head and turned to the east courtyard to feed Xiaowu and others the antidote. Then she moved them to the handcart of the blood refining hall one by one and prepared to send them to the nearest town. After everyone was transported out, Fang Yuan skillfully poured black oil and threw torches. Soon the whole yard was in a sea of fire. The secret stronghold was destroyed, and the blood refining hall would definitely send people to investigate it. The fire still had to be set. On the handcart, Chu Qingning lay flat and looked at the fire in the mountains. The black smoke rushed to the sky. His eyes gradually focused. The mountain wind blew as if God was sighing. Chapter 123. Chu Qingning didn't expect Su Li to answer. Even if Su Li knew the mental method of Xiangong of the blood refining hall, it was impossible for her to know the means and purposes of the blood refining hall. However, Su Li glanced at him and said, Chu Qingning, how talented are you? Chu Qingning turned his head in amazement and immediately saw Su Li sitting on the other side of the handcart looking at him. When I was a child, my father said that I had excellent aptitude and had a chance to reach the inborn realm. Chu Qingning answered honestly. Su Li couldn't help but smile and said, if someone like you enters the blood refining hall, he will become an elder, not a stick. Chu Qingning was suddenly stunned. He heard the hidden meaning in Su Li's words. The conclusion of a person's aptitude is not accurate only by touching the bone. We can know the result only when we really practice. Do you think the blood refining hall is doing good deeds? Chu Qingning shook his head quickly. The vicious blood refining hall certainly wouldn't do good deeds. So, the new blood who enters the blood refining hall is either good or bad. A group of people is destined to be eliminated. If you're the lord of the blood refining hall, will you easily let those people go? Su Li asked again. Chu Qingning looked terrible. After hesitating for a moment, he finally shook his head. According to the style of the blood refining hall, how could they do a losing business? Since they spent money on those people, they should get it back. Su Li said in a relaxed tone, as if she was not talking about a bloody thing at all. So, those teenagers will be cut into sticks. After their injuries are healed, they will appear in the streets and become qualified beggars. What they get from begging will naturally be taken by the blood refining hall. They will slowly die in despair and resentment. This is their end. Chu Qingning stopped breathing and murmured to himself. It turns out to be like this. At this moment, there was no doubt in his mind. Although he killed them by himself, he felt relaxed. Fang Mu was silent on the side, but he also showed a bitter smile. If you can't take revenge, your end is likely to be 100 times more miserable than theirs. Su Li finally said what she really wanted to say. The four people were shocked when they heard the words, and their eyes were full of hatred. So, we have to work harder. Amidst the night breeze, the girl's sigh could be heard. accompanied by the sound of the cart's wheels grinding against each other. Early the next morning, several blood-stained carriages appeared on the streets of Silver Light Town. This immediately shocked the government, and a large number of officers and soldiers were sent to cordon off the scene. Xiaowu and others came to their senses one after another. They thought that the government had saved them, so they shed tears of gratitude and told what had happened. So, it's the evil sects causing trouble. The heavens will not tolerate it. My imperial court is at loggerheads with them. Investigate. I'll inform the county governor immediately. Under the command of the magistrate, the soldiers searched through the night and finally found the mountain courtyard that had been burnt to ashes. For a time, there were many rumors. Some said that the evil sects had committed too many sins and suffered the wrath of heaven, while others said that it was a case of black eating black. However, there were even more people who believed that it was the righteous sects that had taken action. Otherwise, they would not have been able to save so many survivors. After staying in the government office for 3 days, Xiaowu and other children of Dawang village were sent back. Seeing the white lanterns hanging in front of the door, Xiaowu and Datian felt sad. They pushed open the courtyard door and saw the morning hall in the house. Their tears couldn't stop flowing. Wang Lijua, who was following behind them, also had red eyes. Zhua, you're back. Wang Li in the house saw Wang Lijua and immediately hugged him with ecstasy. However, Wang Lijua dodged and said with a disgusted face, "Don't touch me. I'm going to worship my grandfather." After saying that, he ignored Wang Li, who was standing still, and quickly ran to the coffin. Looking at the old man with a serene face in the coffin, he reached out his hand and touched the old man's cold face, which was covered with tears. "Grandpa, I was wrong. I won't listen to my mother anymore. I will go to school and become a learned person like you. If you were alive, how good it would be for me to listen to your teachings." Although he was only 10 years old, he also knew the fickleness of human nature. He woke up that night, but only his grandpa, Xiaowu, and Datian came out to stop him. The woman who said she loved him hid behind the house with the man who also said she loved him. They didn't dare to come out at all. Xiaowu knelt in front of the coffin and clenched his teeth to prevent himself from crying. He clenched his fists so hard that they were almost bleeding. If only the bodyguards had been there that night. No, if he had enough strength to resist like the bodyguard, his grandfather wouldn't have died. In order to survive in this world, one could not rely on others. In the end, one could only rely on oneself. I want to become stronger. A raging flame ignited in the youth's eyes. He could no longer tolerate something similar happening in the future. He wanted to be like his bodyguard and become stronger. Su Li and others looked upstairs. Fang Yuan couldn't help but praise good eyesight. It is not too late for these two boys to start practicing now, as long as they can keep their faith. Chu Qingming touched his chin and said, obviously, he had come out of the shadow of the blood-refining hall. "Xuedong, Fang Mu, what do you think?" Su Li suddenly asked. In Xuedong and Fang Mu were shocked and immediately nodded in unison. "I will listen to Brother Qingming." After they finished speaking, both of them were startled, and their faces instantly flushed red. They stammered for a long time without being able to say anything. Su Li smiled slightly and patted Fang Yuan's shoulder. "That's settled. You can handle it." Fang Yuan was suddenly stunned. "Why him?" Before he could respond, he saw Xiaowu and Datian coming up from downstairs. They plopped and knelt in front of Fang Yuan. They said in unison, "Mr. Bodyguard, please accept us as your apprentice. Teach us martial arts. We are willing to do anything to repay you." Then, Xiaowu and Datian kowtowed 3 times at the same time. Fang Yuan was even more shocked. He pointed to Chu Qingming and others. "Why don't you bow to them?" Xiaowu was suddenly speechless, but Datian said innocently, "Because the eldest brother said that you look the most powerful among the Mr. Bodyguards." As soon as he said that, Chu Qingming and others looked very strange. Xiaowu's face darkened. He couldn't wait to stand up and block Datian's mouth. This silly brother really dared to say anything. Fang Yuan couldn't help laughing in his heart, but his expression didn't change. He said coldly, "I won't accept you." Xiaowu's body trembled slightly, and then he immediately relaxed. He had already known this result. Now he summoned up the courage to say it. Although he was rejected, he had no regrets. "Are you two willing to join the Linley building?" Feng Yuan spoke again, and his tone remained unchanged. Xiaowu raised his head doubtfully, and his face was full of doubts. Wasn't the Linley building a winery in the Qinghe town? Were these powerful Mr. Bodyguards from the winery? Didn't Lady Su say that they were all guards of the Tianya house? Xiao was confused for a while. Chu Qingming couldn't bear it and interrupted. Hey, boy, don't be so sentimental. If you join the Linley building, you can master the power you want. How do you think you two came back? Do you really think that you can be safely rescued in 3 days with just those few officers and soldiers of the government? Xiaowu's eyes widened when he heard that, and his words trembled. Are Mr. Bodyguards? After we rushed back, we found that you two were missing. It took us a long time to find you. Chu Qingming sighed and patted Xiaowu's shoulder. We have helped you to avenge your grandfather. If there's another time, you can do it yourself. Yes. Xiaowu burst into tears and kowtowed 3 times. I am willing to join the Linley building. I will go through fire and water without hesitation. Clap. Suli clapped her hands and said with a smile, Xiaowu, congratulations. Don't worry about the affairs of the school. I will explain it. Well, thank you, lady. Looking at Xiaowu's excitement, Suli stopped smiling, and a ray of light flashed at her eyes. She had seen that Datian had an extraordinary aptitude a long time ago. If he could set foot on the martial arts circle, he would definitely have some achievements. But Datian was a little stupid and listened to Xiaowu for everything. If she could control Xiaowu, she would naturally control Datian. Her identity should not be known by more people. Maybe one day, when Xiaowu really grew up to be a senior of the Linley building, she would let him know who was the real owner of the Linley building. After the dust settled, Xiaowu had no nostalgia for the Dawang village. He went downstairs to pack up and was ready to leave tomorrow. But Wang Lijua pestered him. Brother Xiaowu, take me away. I definitely won't embarrass you, and I'll listen to you. Brother Xiaowu. Seeing that the half-grown child tied to his leg and refused to get down, Xiaowu said helplessly, Your parents won't let you go with me. Besides, it's not me who can decide whether to take you out or not, but Lord Su. Wang Lijua looked bitter. After many experiences, his wisdom grew rapidly. Then he knew that what his mother instilled in him was vulgar and extremely wrong. His heart of repentance had been awakened, but when he remembered that he had offended Su Li verbally, he felt that it was impossible. However, he still plucked up his courage and stood in front of Su Li. Su Li looked at Wang Lijua with a smile in her eyes. This boy was a little interesting. Can you tell me why you want to leave with Xiaowu? Facing Su Li's question, Wang Lijua was nervous and said the reason that had been hovering in his heart for a long time. Because I don't want to be like my parents. I know my father is very weak and what my mother said is wrong. If I stay here, I will definitely be affected by them. My grandfather woke me up, and I can't let him down. I also want to be an excellent person. Seeing that the 10-year-old Wang Lijua spoke clearly and logically, Chu Qingming couldn't help but marvel. Was this the same Wang Lijua who shouted as soon as he entered the door and behaved like his mother? Then, are you ready to suffer with Xiaowu? Su Li smiled more and said, The outside world is not as beautiful as you think. If you give up halfway, you're likely to become a wandering beggar on the street and fight for food with wild dogs. Even if you're beaten to death on the street one day, no one will care about you. Wang Lijua's face turned pale and his eyes showed fear. After all, he was still too young. Just the scenes that Su Li said had already made him shudder. Even when Chu Qingming thought that he was going to give up, Wang Lijua's face flashed a touch of ruthlessness. If so, I only have myself to blame, and I can't blame others. Lady Su, please take me away. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.